Chapter 298 Top 5 in 10 Domains. Supreme Glory. The draw begins. At this moment, in the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty, after seeing Nangong Chen use that astonishing sword, the entire Divine Dynasty was in an uproar. Killed in one move. The prince is mighty. The prince is brave. This is definitely the shortest time to end a battle in history. Who would have thought that Hai Wuhan would die right after he took the stage? With the goddess and the prince, two evildoers, I wonder who will dare to look down on our Tianyuan Divine Dynasty in the future. 10,000 swords become one. This is so cool and so domineering. On the street, the young men all had expressions of admiration on their faces. In their eyes, Nangong Chen is already the most powerful evildoer in the Xiantian realm, and no one can defeat him. This also made them secretly make up their minds to practice hard in the future. They couldn't say they could catch up with the other party, but they must at least be able to see the other party's back. Some young and pretty women also had their beautiful eyes shining brightly, looking at the projection in the air with an extremely obsessed look. At this moment, in their beautiful eyes, there's only the man in white clothes fighting with a sword, and no other figures can be seen. As the saying goes, there are 10 geniuses in the world, and the prince alone occupies 9 of them. It is both fortunate and sad for a person to have met such a stunning person of the opposite sex when he is young. And in the palace, after seeing Nangong Chen's victory, all the civil and military officials in the court were extremely excited. Who would have thought that the 2 least favored geniuses would be the only ones to make it into the top 5 in the end? Even those geniuses who were previously favored by everyone and were at the top of the heavenly ranking, such as Ba Wang, Jiang Yingyue, etc., fell in this round. Being in the top 5 of the 10 domains, what an honor it is, enough to be recorded in the history books and be remembered through the ages. Nangong Chen was even more proud, laughing with his white teeth showing. As expected of my son, he truly has the potential to become an immortal. He was filled with shock, but also with a hint of emotion. Who would have thought that his son, who had no talent for cultivation at all, would suddenly realize the truth? After that, he soared to the top 10 of the list, and now he has stepped into a bigger stage and reached the top 5 of the 10 domains. In the past, he wouldn't even dare to think about it. At that time, he was still worried about his son's lack of talent for cultivation and what to do in the future. But now, he no longer has to worry about this problem. Even his plan, which he hasn't mentioned for a long time, is slightly shaken. Back then, he decided to raise Nangong Chen until he grew up and was able to take care of himself, and then he would go after his wife. Rukin, did you see that? Now our son can stand on his own. Nangong Chen murmured, looking into the distance, and a rare look of tenderness appeared on his resolute face. When everything is over and the dust is settled, I will come find you, he said to himself, his eyes full of determination. When Rukin left, the panic and helplessness on her face could not be faked. This proved that something must have happened in the upper realm. Nangong Chen was extremely scared, afraid that one day he would not be able to see his wife for the last time. Therefore, he had to go to the upper realm as soon as possible to find the whereabouts of his wife. If Nangong Chen knew that his father would leave him in the near future, he would probably be sad for a long time. At this time, Su Ming also noticed Nangong Chen's abnormality. His eyes were full of complexity. He shook his head slightly and sighed softly. Well, at the same time, after seeing Nangong Chen's sword-like posture, Wang Yuxuan's eyes lit up and she looked like an infatuated fan. Master, this move is so cool. That woman surnamed Lu left so quickly. It's such a pity that I didn't get to see such a cool sword move. If she saw it, she would be so shocked that she would be speechless. Wang Yuxuan said to herself that even though she was not a sword practitioner, she could see the extraordinary nature of this move. Soon, Wang Yuxuan stretched out her crystal-clear arms, shook the expressionless girl beside her, and said excitedly, Warner, you also think this sword is very handsome, right? You must also feel that the woman regrets not seeing it. Yes. Zhou Warner responded helplessly. This was the 9th time the other party had asked her. If it were her in the past, if someone had bothered her like this, they would have been beheaded long ago. I knew you also thought that woman would regret it. But fortunately, if she saw it, she would probably become even more obsessed with the master, and then we would have another competitor. Wang Yuxuan laughed, her dark eyebrows curved, the corners of her mouth slightly raised, revealing a pair of cute little fangs, and her smart eyes were as bright as stars. Others couldn't see it, but she had already seen it. Lu Rian might have some feelings for her master, but she was a little timid and didn't dare to pursue her directly. She likes Nangong Chen too. Zhou Warner's face, as delicate as a porcelain doll, was slightly frowned, and there was a hint of doubt under her dark eyes. Can't you see? There was a hint of suspicion in Wang Yuxuan's big eyes, and she leaned forward to look into the other person's dark eyes. The woman's eyes lit up when she saw her master. How could someone be so dull as not to notice this? Zhou Wanner was stunned. She really couldn't see it. Her experiences from childhood to adulthood had already closed her emotions. If she hadn't met Nangong Chen, she might never know what love is in her life. This also made her ignore those suitors who circled around Beijing 3 times over the years. Others thought she was aloof, but in fact, she just blocked her emotions. Her long-deceased assassin master once said that the most taboo thing in the assassin business is emotion. But now, she seems to have been taught to have feelings. Seeing her stunned, Wang Yuxuan held her forehead with her hand, and there seemed to be a few black lines on her forehead. She forgot that the other party had been a killer since childhood and would definitely not understand this aspect. So, Wang Yuxuan explained to her slowly without a trace of impatience. After all, the girl in front of her is as pretty as her own baby face. If she can be trained well, no, it should be taught well. If she can be taught well, she will be her ally in the future. The next day, on the battlefield of heaven and earth. Today is the competition for the top 3. I'm really looking forward to it. I wonder who among these 5 people will make it into the top 3. No need to think, there must be that quasi-saint from Xintian territory among them. If anyone encounters him, I'm afraid they won't be able to fight back at all. Yeah, but why the top 3? Hiss, could it be that one of these 5 people got a buy? Yes, you guessed it right. So people actually got a buy. Let's see who will be so lucky. Before the battle even started, the geniuses had already started discussing today's battle, and it was very lively. That's right, among the top 5 today, one will be directly given a bye and enter tomorrow's championship battle. That is, the top 3. As long as you are in the top 5, there is a chance of winning. This is why, since ancient times, there have been so many people with extraordinary luck who have average strength but can enter the Temple of Inheritance. Obviously, these geniuses who entered the Immortal Treasure have already mastered the rules of the second round. Yes, if there's a bye, that means there will only be 2 fights today. Who do you think will get the bye? At this time, Lu Dezhu said in a low voice. Naturally, the voices of these people's discussions could not escape their ears, and they could hear them clearly. When they first heard about the buys, they were a little shocked. They thought it was unfair that such a big event would have the unstable factor of buys. However, Li Qixin just smiled at this. After all, there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. It is already very good to be allowed to participate. It shouldn't be Brother Nangong. After all, he got a buy in a round before last. Wang Tung spoke up and shook his head. After hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. There was indeed some truth to this. After all, the goddess of luck would not always favor one person. Li Muxiu also spoke slowly. If we subtract Brother Nangong, among the remaining 4, I hope that the one who gets a buy will be Goddess Su or Luanxin. After Goddess Su received a buy, we are all very happy. And since Luanxin received a buy, there is still a chance for Brother Nangong and Goddess Su to advance to the top 3. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's eyes lit up and they nodded. Indeed, if these 2 were to be given a buy, it would be the best outcome for them. If you draw the heart of the mess, you can't fight it at all. If you draw the other 2, although they are equally tricky, you can still deal with them. Soon, the figure of the star envoy appeared on the stage, and the discussion among the crowd immediately subsided. In the hands of the star envoy, there were 5 tokens floating, which were also the results of the draw to determine the top 5 candidates. Yes, among the top 5 this time, 3 are from Xintian territory. This really surprised this envoy. The star envoy glanced around, and then looked towards the direction of Xintian territory and praised lightly. After these words fell, everyone's faces were extremely shocked. They had never thought that this star envoy would actually praise the Xintian realm. This was also the first time in history that he had praised a realm. But soon, someone said disdainfully, TSK, isn't it just that a quasi-saint got in? Otherwise, with the strength of their Xintian realm, how could 3 people get in? That's right, a quasi-saint has sneaked in. How can we fight him? The others also echoed in a cold voice. However, their voices were extremely low. If they spoke louder, it would upset the star, and that would be disastrous. But even so, it was still heard by Li Qixin and others. It's true that a dog can't spit out ivory. Even if we subtract the quasi-saint, we still have 2 people who can enter. What about you? Lu Dezhu said with a smile, looking at the remaining geniuses in the sea area and the remaining few members of the God clan. After these words were spoken, the faces of those who had spoken earlier became a little embarrassed. So what if 2 of them go in? Can 2 mere great powers defeat Xianjia and Hu Yaoyao? The sea area's genius was still relentless and aggressive, looking at them with a hint of resentment in his eyes. If it weren't for them, Hai Wuhan wouldn't have died here, and the god of killing at least wouldn't have killed him. It's all because of these humans fanning the flames. Thinking that he would be enraged by his clan members after leaving, the prodigy's face turned even worse. After hearing what the other party said, Lu Dezhu did not get angry, but continued to say with a look of wanting a beating. Whether or not I can defeat you is one thing, but Brother Nangong, with his great power, has truly killed your sea monster that has not appeared in 10,000 years in a single globe. Hiss, are these just too powerful people? They can kill your master in seconds. I'm afraid that even if Hai Wuhan were alive, he wouldn't be as arrogant as the dog you left behind. Could it be that someone is rushing out here to get scolded because their master is dead and they'll be scolded or even severely punished? These two sentences were extremely destructive, and they immediately broke the defense of the sea area genius, who started cursing. I'm anxious. I'm so anxious. Lu Dezhu smiled, ignoring the other party's broken look, and just repeated the word anxious. Not long after, the sea area genius seemed to be deprived of oxygen and was actually angered to death by Lu Dezhu. After seeing this, Wang Tung and the others were also greatly shocked and gave him a thumbs up. Damn, you are really something. You can really make the other party angry. They didn't expect that Lu Dezhu, who had lived in a greenhouse since childhood, would actually curse art like this. Seeing them looking at him, Lu Dezhu also laughed and said, I don't know anything else, but I have been able to talk since I was a child. Even I can't talk better than myself. Li Qixin and the others nodded. They really believed what he said. After a short episode, as the sea area prodigy fell silent, the man from the God clan also stopped talking and lowered his head, fearing that he would be noticed by the fat man. After all, that mouth is too poisonous. If it were him, he might not be able to accept it. The star envoy on the stage felt that the atmosphere was about right, so he waved his hand and distributed the 5-star tokens. By the way, there will be a by this time. Don't blame me for not reminding you. If anyone is lucky enough to draw it, they can directly enter the top 3. After sending it, the star envoy seemed to remember something and gave a subtle reminder. At this moment, everyone's attention was not on the top, but on the 5 tokens being issued, with fiery expressions on their faces. We'll get that by spot. Soon, the 5 tokens were in their hands. Xian Jie was wearing a platinum robe with shining light, and he flipped over the token in his hand lightly. Demon Realm, Fox Yao Yao. 5 large characters came into view and appeared before him. When Xuanjie saw it, he was neither sad nor happy, and his expression did not change at all, as if what he had drawn was just a small insect. Chapter 299, I Only Care About You. After a while, Xian Jie shook his head slightly, revealing a trace of regret, and said lightly, that kid is really lucky. He even made it to the top 5 and didn't even encounter it. For him, the only thing he was still obsessed with was not taking off Nangong Chen's head with his own hands. After all, the other party not only spoke wildly and blasphemed the gods, but also killed so many of his tribesmen in the first round. It can be said that the relationship between the two has become extremely tense, and there is no room for reversal. Of course, although Nangong Chen had shown extraordinary talent before, he still had confidence and believed that he could suppress the opponent single-handedly. After all, he was a demigod in legend, a fact known only to a few in the God clan. I hope you can survive until tomorrow. Xuanjie murmured, his hands clenching involuntarily. After seeing Xian Jie draw Hu Yao Yao, Xian Hong breathed a sigh of relief and congratulated him. Congratulations, son of God, for securing your place in the top 3. Others may not know how terrifying the other party is, but Xian Hong knows it very clearly. Among all the people present, not counting the cheating quasi-saint, no one can be an enemy of Xian Jie, not even the 2 people mentioned earlier. It can be said that as long as he doesn't meet Luanxin, Xuanjie will still be the second this time, and no one can shake his position. On the other side, Hu Yao Yao, with golden hair as bright as the sun, frowned slightly when she learned that her opponent was Xian Jie. It's actually him, she murmured, with a deep fear in her beautiful eyes. In terms of which genius present gave her the strongest sense of oppression, it was undoubtedly Xian Jie. The other party's extremely high blood concentration allows him to use various magical powers of the gods at will to fight. There are even rumors that the other party is a demigod. A demigod body means that half of the other party's body is full of divinity, which is called a god container. By calling on the god, one can bless his own body with the power of a god intact. This is a very terrifying concept. The gods in the burial sky realm are the most powerful among all the races in the heavens. Even the ancient humans have to avoid them temporarily. It is hard to imagine how powerful Xian Jie, who possesses half the power of a god, would be. I didn't expect that I would actually draw that girl, the boy's significant other. Luanxin smiled evilly, looking at the name on the token in his hand. The 2 big words, Su Li, were written on it. He looked extremely happy. You know, that kid had cheated him so badly before, and now he could finally get some interest back. But it's a pity that I didn't draw the guy himself. I can't kill him with my own hands. Well, let's start with you, girl. He shook his head, his horns flashing with evil light, and his eyes were extremely cold. No matter what, we can't let her escape easily this time, let alone let her surrender. He knew that the other party must have the magic weapon given by that boy to protect his mind. So he also hardened his heart and took out a blood-stained rune with a painful look on his face. This is the soul-confusing talisman that he had exchanged for from the headquarters with great difficulty. It can ignore the opponent's spiritual protection and control the opponent easily. Unless the other party can produce 5, 6, 7, or 8 magic weapons specifically for protecting the soul. Otherwise, Luan Xin smiled evilly, and the next moment, his face turned grim as he thought of what Nangong Chen had done before. I want her to die in front of you with my own hands. Luan Xin gritted his teeth, and a murderous intent was enough to condense in his substance, turning into a bloody sharp knife, making everyone around him extremely frightened and palpitating. Thinking of the other person's painful appearance, he narrowed his eyes slightly and couldn't wait to start. On the other side, Su Li looked at the word Luan Xin on the token and frowned slightly. Nangong Chen also fell into deep thought as he looked at the buy token in his hand, with a puzzled look on his face. How come he got to buy again? He couldn't wait to draw those two guys. What bad luck. Nangong Chen cursed softly, his face full of dissatisfaction. If an ordinary person had drawn a buy and made it into the top 3 for nothing, he would probably have been grinning from ear to ear. But Nangong Chen was different. He had drawn a buy and would think that the person who drew the lots was targeting him. After all, he really wanted to draw Xianjie, who had been the shady guy before and a lackey of the blood god cult. Not to mention that he was upset by Xianjie's previous arrogance. Just the elixir given by Su Li to Xian Hong during the battle was enough to kill the other party hundreds of times. As for Luan Xin, even though he was badly tricked by me, I'm sorry, he still has to die. The reason is simple. He is a member of the blood god cult, and he will not let go of anyone who is from the blood god cult. But soon, he noticed the token in Su Li's hand, on which were written 2 big words, Luan Exit. How could it be him? Nangong Chen frowned slightly. If he drew it himself, he would have the human emperor sword as a trump card, plus the holy medicine in the Tianyuan spiritual steel. It should not be a problem to kill the opponent alive. But the problem now is that Su Li has drawn it, but she doesn't have the same trump card as herself, and it is difficult to deal with this confused mind. He knew very well that the strength of a quasi-saint was not comparable to that of a god king. No matter how monstrous Su Li was, he could not advance beyond 2 realms. Besides, the other party is not just an ordinary quasi-saint. At least he is one of the best among the quasi-saints. Right now, it's almost a dead end, and Su Li can only surrender, but if he surrenders, he will only be able to stay in the top 5. This wasn't the strength she should have. If that beast Luan Xin hadn't come in, she could have gone a long way. Damn it. Nangong Chen's eyes were cold as he looked at Luan Xin in the corner, feeling a little sorry for Su Li. Su Li, who was standing aside, also knew that she would most likely not be a match for Luan Xian, but she was very calm, with her ice blue eyes very indifferent. After all, she did not care much about the ranking this time. She was already very satisfied to have come this far. You know, she and Nangong Chen had not practiced as long as other geniuses in terms of age, experience, or cultivation. The most important thing is that even though she is 5th, she is not much behind Nangong Chen. This is what makes her happiest. After all, she can catch up with the other party. But soon, she felt the anger of the person next to her. Her cold and fairy-like face was stunned for a moment, and then she felt a little amused. A pair of beautiful eyes looked at Nangong Chen, with an extremely complicated expression, containing both joy and doting. I'm not angry yet. So why is he angry? Like a little kid? Is he just too concerned about me? So cute. Puff. When Su Li thought of this, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a smile that was enough to make the world dim. Nangong Chen was stunned. He didn't expect Su Li to be able to laugh at this time. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. After all, the opponent had fought with all his might in every previous match, and it could be said that he cared deeply about winning or losing. If that's the case, shouldn't he show some anger? But why is he still laughing so happily? What is going on? You don't mind losing? After all, you made it to the top 5. After thinking for a while and couldn't think of anything, Nangong Chen said hesitantly. He found that he seemed to be unable to see through Su Li. I don't care. After saying that, Su Li shook her head without hesitation and looked at him quietly. Her ice blue eyes blinked, and a beautiful light flashed in them that was so beautiful that it made people's heart tremble. All right, Nangong Chen seemed to want to say something, but after thinking it over, he didn't say it. If she really didn't care, why did she fight so hard before? Seeing him in such a dilemma, Su Li smiled faintly, then looked into his eyes and said seriously, I don't care about winning or losing, but I care about you. But you're too fast. I always want to catch up with you and don't want to fall too far behind you. Now that we're only in the top 5, even if you take first place, we're only a little bit behind. I'm already satisfied. At least I can still see your back. That cold and pleasant voice echoed in Nangong Chen's ears. He was stunned. He didn't expect that the reason behind this was actually himself. For a moment, he felt a little uncomfortable with the girl's blunt words, and even his cheeks felt hot. No, since when did people with nothing become so attractive? Or has Sanwu already awakened his self-awareness and is ready to evolve into a human? Nangong Chen's thoughts were in a mess, with strange ideas flashing wildly in his mind, trying to ease the sudden emotion that had just emerged. Su Li on the side just looked at him quietly without saying a word, her eyes full of tenderness, her 3,000 silver hairs scattered around her waist, outlining a beautiful picture under the starry sky. After a long time, Nangong Chen coughed lightly, and his handsome face returned to its usual calmness. Okay, if you feel ready in the future, you can call me. I will always be waiting for you. He was also wondering if he was progressing too fast, but it was okay. The other party was the girl of destiny. If he stopped, he would be surpassed by her in minutes. By then, he will be a gigolo. Although he often talks about being a gigolo, it's just talk. He has bad teeth and can't be a gigolo. After hearing this, Su Li's eyebrows curved, and she was very happy. The other party's words are nothing short of the most touching love letter in the world. Good. She nodded heavily and responded seriously. At the same time, the Star Envoy also spoke on the stage. The first battle will be between Xintian territory Luanxin and Xintian territory Su Li. The sound was like a huge bell, resounding throughout the entire battlefield of heaven and earth. Are you going to play in the first match? Nangong Chen frowned, not expecting it to happen so quickly. He reached out his hand and took out a white Taoist robe. This is the inheritance I received in the ancient palace. It can block the attacks of the true immortals. If you deal with this chaotic mind, the other party should be unable to do anything to you. We're to be on the safe side. Su Li originally wanted to refuse, but seeing the other party's worried look, he silently retracted his offer and put on the white Taoist robe. Since this Taoist robe was tailor-made for Nangong Chen, it seemed a little loose when worn by Su Li. However, even so, it could not hide her proud figure. After putting on the sect leader's robe, Su Li's temperament became more mysterious, adding a bit of fairy charm, and she looked like the sect's female leader. Even though the other party put on the sect leader's robe, Nangong Chen was still not at ease. He took out more than a dozen holy and immortal weapons from his storage ring to defend against soul attacks. This is a mortal soul bead. If he dares to attack your soul, it can bounce it back and disturb his mind. This is the soul-destroying hammer. It can penetrate everything and directly attack his soul, and it can also dissolve attacks from his soul. This is the soul burial bell. After explaining all this to Su Li, Nangong Chen felt relieved, and at the same time, a cold look appeared in his eyes. These immortal weapons and holy artifacts are enough to give the opponent a hard time. Although they cannot kill him, they can make him feel disgusted and torture his mentality. Damn it, aren't you the best at using soul attacks and playing the magic flute? I want to see how you deal with these things. At this moment, everyone was talking about it after hearing that Su Li had drawn the Luanxin. Yes, I didn't expect that the first battle here would be a civil war in Xintian territory, but it's likely that Luanxin will advance. Sigh, nothing to watch again. Another crushing defeat. Boring. Yeah, he's a quasi-saint, yet he comes to participate in the immortal treasure. How shameless. At that age, he could probably be my grandfather. I hope that human woman can hold on a little longer. She performed so brilliantly before, it's a shame to lose in this round. Some geniuses showed regret on their faces. After all, Su Li's stunning counterattack had left a deep impression on them, and they still felt a sense of hero appreciating another hero. But soon, someone said curiously, "But tell me, apart from these two, who among the remaining Xianjia, Hu Yao Yao, and the god of killing will be given a bye? Who knows? We'll have to wait until the next game starts to find out." On Li Qixin sighed. When they heard that goddess Su had drawn the Chaos Heart, their expressions changed, and they were worried. Oops, I actually drew Luanxin. Xiongbi used his soul beads to resist the divine soul attack earlier. The opponent must have been prepared when he came on stage. I wonder if there will be any accidents. Alas, I didn't expect that the prodigy from our Xiantian domain would be eliminated in the first round. It would have been much better if Luanxin had drawn Xuanjia. Everyone was talking about it, and was very worried about Su Li. Even Chu Yin and Xi Ming pursed their lips and looked at Su Li not far away with complicated expressions. Soon, two figures appeared on the stage. Luanxin was wearing a black robe, had an old face, a pair of goat horns on his head, his eyes were very cold, and the aura on his body was very terrifying. Just when he raised his hand, an astonishing pressure emerged. Opposite him, Su Li was wearing a white Taoist robe. She had a beautiful face, silver hair like a waterfall, and the ice phoenix mark on her forehead was shining brightly. Her temperament was as cold as an immortal, with an otherworldly Taoist charm. Chapter 300. Su Li is in a state of confusion, a strange scene. At this time, in the outside world, when everyone learned that Su Li's opponent was Wanxin, their reaction was shocked. How did he get it? Oh no, I actually drew the Wanxin. Yes, if we draw another genius, there's still a glimmer of hope of winning. But the opponent is a quasi-saint of the Blood God sect. Even Xianjia, the last champion, is no match for him. They all shook their heads and spoke worriedly. In front of such a powerful quasi-saint, even the most monstrous genius would appear so pale and powerless. There's no way. This is the oppressive feeling brought by a quasi-saint, which is far beyond the reach of other gods. A saint is a saint, a god king is a god king, but the difference in combat power between the two is completely different. So, basically no matter who it is, as long as they draw the Wanxin, there is only one outcome, which is loss. The girl from the divine tribe earlier was a living example. They looked at the silver-haired girl in the projection, and their hearts became more and more desperate, which was beyond words. Not only did they see no hope, even the powerful ones in the void shook their heads with regretful expressions. Alas, if she hadn't encountered Wanxin, perhaps this woman could have gone a little further. Yes, with the talent she has shown before, she is not inferior to the princess of the demon realm at all. Even if she cultivates for a few more years, Xianjia may be able to fight her. What a trick of fate! What a trick of fate! However, being able to enter the top 5 is already a great honor for us in Xintian territory. As for the top 3 or the championship, we should not have any extravagant hopes. The powerful men sighed with emotion and looked at each other in bewilderment. Soon, they turned their gaze back to the projection. The battle is about to begin. For them, if Su Li could hold on for a few more breaths, it would be a gain. At this moment, on the ring, although the two men had not yet fought, it seemed as if there was an astonishing collision of auras, like thunder intertwined in the sky, making bursts of roaring sounds. It's a shame I didn't get that kid. I can't let him be in a state of being unable to live or die. Well, I'll just take some interest from you first. A cruel expression flashed across Wanxin's face, and then his eyes turned cold as he said jokingly, "Don't blame me for showing no mercy. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being close to that brat. Are you done?" Su Li's brows were frosty, and there was no trace of fear on her delicate face. She said coldly, such an arrogant attitude naturally attracted the attention of the talented people below the stage. This character SSS, I like it. Some of the Tianjiao showed admiration and praised her highly, but soon became a little sad. It's a pity that the other party has already been taken. Yeah, I really don't know how that god of death managed to make this woman willingly do it. Alas, if possible, I really want to ask him for advice. Come on, you're still asking for leave. Be careful, or the god of death will send you into a killing array. Of course, some people also said with a bitter tone, curling their lips, he's just a little more handsome, a little more talented, and a little richer than us. The reactions of these people were just a minor episode. Back on the stage, when Wanxin heard Su Li's words, his face turned cold, and he said viciously, "Damn it, you and that kid both deserve to die." The other party's disregard for his reaction reminded him of Nangong Chen, and even more so, of the people who bullied him when he was a child. At that time, he was powerless and could only let himself be slaughtered. But now, as one of the 4 masters of the blood god cult in the lower realm, his cultivation is not only extraordinary, but his status is also above everyone else. How dare the other party, a mere genius, look down on him? As the star envoy announced the start of the battle, Wanxin took the first step. He played the magic flute. His eyes sparkled with demonic intent, and the pair of goat horns were entwined with demonic charm. When he raised his hand, a suffocating black power burst out. At this moment, his confused mind is like that of a peerless demon king. When everyone saw this scene, they took a deep breath inwardly, their eyes filled with immense relief. If they had met each other before, they would have been helpless and would probably have perished. This power is so powerful that it is hard to describe. It is completely different from the previous battles with those geniuses. This is the power from a quasi-saint. Boom! The next moment, one could hear the rippling devilish sound pouring out like a flood. The devilish intent that filled the sky seemed to turn into a blood-red sword that could pierce through the soul. This is one of the magical powers that confuses the mind. The devilish sound can break the soul. When ordinary people hear it, if they're not prepared at all, their minds will be controlled by it in an instant, and they will become a puppet at his mercy. Moreover, its speed is extremely fast and difficult to resist, which is why so many geniuses were afraid of encountering Wanxin in the past. As for the soul, they really had no way to deal with it. And the reason why Xian Xiangling was able to counter a few moves was that the opponent's soul had taboos and was not afraid of the attacks of confused soul at all. Of course, she is the only special one. Su Li stood on the stage. Her beautiful eyes were solemn, and her pretty face was a little pale. She had not expected that the quasi-saint would be so terrifying. If she had not been prepared for this move of the opponent, she would probably have died here today. Even the sect leader robe that Nangong Chen borrowed from her could not withstand this kind of spiritual attack. Fortunately, Nangong Chen gave her many magic weapons to deal with the opponent's spiritual attack. Seeing that the blood-red sword was about to pierce through the opponent's soul, Wanqing couldn't help but smile evilly. At this moment, in his eyes, the soul in the other person's body was as weak as a lamb to be slaughtered. However, the next moment, the situation suddenly changed. Su Li endured the opponent's pressure and took a deep breath. Her snow-white skin undulated slightly. She raised her white hands and sacrificed the Mortal Soul Bead. The Mortal Soul Bead was crystal white in color, emitting a sacred aura. It floated in the void and instantly swallowed the blood-red sword. However, these things happened in just a moment. All the geniuses present widened their eyes and watched the scene happening on the ring in disbelief. What happened? Where's the sword? How did it suddenly disappear? They were speechless for a long time, and no one responded to them. They were all shocked by this scene. At the same time, Wanqing was stunned when he saw the small sword created by his magic flute disappear, and stood there blankly. This was the first time in all these years that he saw the demonic sound soul-breaking technique fail. You know, before, even if Xiongde had a sacred artifact to protect his soul, the collision of the two would still unleash terrifying power. But this time, under the condition of the magic power that he deliberately strengthened, the sound of the magic flute was abruptly ineffective. But soon, Wanqing reacted and looked at the crystal beads that appeared in the void at some unknown time, with a look of realization on his face. So, it's another sacred artifact that protects the soul. Okay, I want to see how many times it can protect you. He mistakenly thought that this mortal soul bead was the same as the holy weapon used by Xiongde before. Both were defensive types and had no offensive means. In fact, this is not the case. The reason why the fan in the fan character of the Soul Pearl has an extra fan in it compared to the Soul Pearl is that it means that when the Soul Pearl is nurtured as a natal magic weapon in the hands of a strong person, it can give birth to some special magical powers and be promoted to a magic weapon that is almost a residual immortal weapon. Even though it is a broken immortal weapon, if a strong person can use it to its full potential, the power it unleashes will be enough to kill more than a dozen enemies of the same level. Of course, Wanqing didn't know all this. After he saw that the sound of his magic flute was blocked, he clenched his hands, and the devilish intent overflowed, transforming into a pair of ruthless and extinct devil hands, and rushed toward Su Li. If I can't hit your soul, can't I hit your body? Wanqing thought to himself, and when he saw that Su Li was unmoved, he sneered repeatedly, revealing a look of pleasure and disdain. What a crap genius, he still has to die in my hands. I wonder how that kid will react if I destroy this beauty with my own hands? Was it pain? Or despair? Or perhaps he was staring at me with rage, wishing he could cut him into pieces, but unable to do anything, shedding tears of blood. Thinking of that scene, Wanqing couldn't help but hum softly, feeling very refreshed. Of course, the two devil palms in his hands fell without holding back. Seeing the pitch-black devil's hand full of demonic energy attacking the silver-haired girl, everyone shook their heads with regretful expressions on their faces. Everything will eventually end. The only way now is to surrender. If he doesn't surrender, he can only wait for death. However, the other party doesn't seem to be someone who will die in vain, so there is a high probability that he will surrender. However, at this moment, a flash of blood light flashed from the confused pupils. The crystal-clear mortal soul bead suddenly condensed its magic power and spat out the blood-red sword it had swallowed before. Its power did not decrease, and it burst out completely. You have to know that the magical power that Wanqing just released was the blood sword that he had been brewing for a long time and condensing with great painstaking efforts. If there are people who cultivate the soul here, they will know how difficult it is to kill the soul and transform it into a human form. However, if the transformation is successful, the power it possesses will not be comparable to ordinary soul attack techniques. Swish! The blood-red soul sword was extremely fast, and it passed through the mind and was about to pierce through the soul. Puff! The next moment, Wanqing spat out a mouthful of blood. His breathing became disordered, and his face was extremely pale. He looked at Su Li with disbelief in his eyes. If he had not played his trump card at the last moment and swallowed the small sword, he would probably have died on the spot in his own hands today. Although he condensed this sword, even he himself could not withstand it. Not far away, Nangong Chen watched this scene coldly. In his double pupils, his confused soul was now covered with countless cracks, like a broken porcelain. The reason for all this is the arrogance and ignorance of the confused mind. Suffer the consequences of your own actions. Nangong Chen sneered, and said with a sense of relief, "Junior, this isn't a soul bead? What on earth is it that dares to plot against me?" Luanxin felt the pain in his soul as if it were being cut by a knife, and he gritted his teeth as beads of sweat kept appearing on his forehead. At this moment, his eyes looking at the rice soul pearl were filled with confusion and deep fear. Su Li's silver hair was flying, and her face was delicate. After hearing Luanxin's words, she ignored them, and her eyes flashed. Seeing the other party like this, his soul must have suffered a huge blow. Hiss! I didn't expect that what Nangong Chen said was right. In that case, let's kill him while he's ill. The next moment, she took out a small jade-yellow hammer. The hammer was covered with dense, ancient runes and exuded an astonishing pressure, as if it was forged by an almighty power. After Su Li took it out, the whole person felt different. There was a dangerous cold light flashing in his eyes. He held the soul-destroying hammer in his bare hands and smashed it towards Luanxin. That's right, this is the legendary immortal weapon, the soul-destroying hammer, which can penetrate everything and directly attack the soul of any living being. At the same time, it can also destroy the opponent's soul attack. However, this soul-destroying hammer is not so easy to control. It requires extremely high personal cultivation and soul power. Otherwise, the user will be exhausted in a short time. At this moment, after pondering for a while, Luanxin finally remembered the origin of the soul bead. With a look of sudden realization on his face, he muttered to himself, "I finally remembered. It turned out to be a mortal soul bead. I was wondering, how could there be a soul bead so similar to it in this lower world? This woman's luck is truly incredible. She even managed to obtain the mortal soul pearl, a treasure like it. If I could get it, wouldn't I be invincible?" Luanxin first expressed his admiration for the other party, and then seemed to have thought of something. His eyes showed greed, and his saliva was almost falling from his mouth. Since it can bounce back his spiritual attack, then he can just not attack, and that's it. Besides, this mortal soul bead doesn't have a 100% chance of hitting the target. Just like what happened just now. If he hadn't been careless, how could he have been tricked by this girl? Forget it. The damage to the soul is a small matter. If I can get the soul bead, I will make my money back. Thinking of this, the evil light in his eyes became brighter, and he secretly made up his mind to get the mortal soul orb no matter what. At this moment, a dangerous aura suddenly rose from the front. He looked forward and was stunned on the spot. Holy crap, where did this soul-destroying hammer come from? The small hammer rushing towards him directly evoked memories deep in Luanxin's mind, and he couldn't help but curse. In the world, there are only a few records of magical instruments of the soul, and the mortal soul bead, just now, plus the soul-destroying hammer now, are among the very few, and are immortal instruments that are famous throughout the world. This is why a quasi-saint was so shocked after seeing it. The key is that these two immortal artifacts are things that have been lost for a long time. Luanxin's face changed and became extremely solemn. He knew clearly that if this hammer came down, his soul would be shattered. The collapse of his soul means that he is about to perish completely. Without thinking too much, he immediately burst out his skills and ran away with all his strength. And behind him, Su Li was chasing him relentlessly, with ice blooming under her feet, snow-white hair dancing, and a soul-destroying hammer in her hand, looking very aggressive. Chapter 301. Heaven-defying means the powerful is chasing the quasi-saint? Seeing such a strange scene, everyone was stunned and stood there stupidly, not knowing what to say. A dignified quasi-saint was actually being chased by a genius in the realm of great power. They could even clearly see that while he was escaping, Luanxin kept spitting out blood. His face became paler and paler, and his goat horns gradually dimmed, making him look extremely miserable. Everyone was puzzled, but soon someone remembered something and said in shock, "Did you hear what that quasi-saint said just now?" He said that the little hammer seemed to be the legendary soul-destroying hammer. When these words were spoken, all the geniuses present were stunned, but they soon remembered something and gasped. The soul-destroying hammer, this is a legendary magical weapon that can destroy the soul. Am I remembering correctly? You're not mistaken. I also remember that ancient book records that this soul-destroying hammer is a treasure coveted by countless cultivators of the spirit and soul. It is said that even the Supreme Being has not been able to find it. Didn't they say they had already disappeared from the world? Why did they suddenly appear? Have you forgotten? In the first round of trials, he came in second and obtained a magical weapon. Oh yes, then where did the other party get this mortal soul orb and this soul-destroying hammer? Could it be that someone is so incredibly lucky that they could obtain them in this lower realm? Obviously, that's impossible. For a moment, they were all puzzled as to where these two sudden immortal weapons came from. At this moment, someone seemed to suddenly remember something and said, "Have you forgotten that the sword move used by the god of death earlier was more than 300 holy weapons?" It is said that someone clearly saw that there were 50 immortal weapons and about 250 holy weapons among them. After these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. After they realized what was happening, their expressions gradually became interesting. Yes, they forgot that the impact that the god of death had on them before was nothing compared to what they had now. Could it be that the god of death actually plundered a Taoist sect from the upper realm? Or is he the illegitimate son of some supreme being and came to the immortal realm purely for fun? And the immortal weapon in that woman's hand was also given by the other party? But soon, someone speculated with a hint of realization. After hearing this, the others also gasped and looked at each other, but soon shook their heads and said, "Impossible, absolutely impossible. If he is really as awesome as you say, then why is he still in the lower realm? Yeah, that's too much an exaggeration. I'd rather believe he's the illegitimate son of some powerful sword master from the upper realm than believe he plundered an upper realm orthodoxy." I agree. When Li Qixin and the others saw the scene on the stage, they were all stunned, and their reactions were no less severe than those of the geniuses from other domains. Goddess Su is actually chasing after a quasi-saint. Oh my god, I'm not dreaming. Is this still the genius of our generation? He's like a monster. Lu Dazui, Xiongda, and others were also speechless and extremely shocked. No one expected that the battle, which seemed to be a foregone conclusion at the beginning, would evolve into such an exaggerated level. At the same time, in the outside world, after seeing how fierce Goddess Su was picking up a hammer and chasing after Wanxin, who was running away with his head in his hands, the whole audience fell silent. No matter how they predicted it before, they never thought of this scene. After a brief silence, there was a commotion. Tell me, what is this projected image? No, this must be a mistake. Maybe the quasi-saint across from me switched it. What on earth just happened? How did the situation turn around in an instant? Could it be that Goddess Su is really going to create a miracle and defeat that chaotic mind with her great power? In the streets and alleys, people were filled with mixed emotions, a mixture of shock and confusion. They could not see the confrontation between Su Li and Wanxin's soul. They only saw that after the battle started. Wanxin seemed to have played the magic flute, but was suddenly attacked back and vomited blood. Then, this scene appears in the picture. However, in the Yangyang Xintian territory, how could there be no one who could see the trick? Not long after, in the Chu city, there seemed to be a strong man who was good at attacking the soul. He explained with an expression of shock that was difficult to conceal. If I'm not mistaken, the magic weapons that Goddess Su just took out are all famous immortal artifacts recorded in ancient times. Not only that, they are also extremely rare immortal artifacts of the soul. Just like that dazzling pearl from earlier, it seems to be the legendary mortal soul pearl, and that little hammer just now, hiss. Its origin is incredibly shocking. When talking about the small hammer, the expert paused for a moment, and then continued with a look of deep shock. It is the innate immortal weapon left behind by a renowned divine soul master, a peak ancient divine soul master. It is the soul-destroying hammer. After he finished speaking, the whole audience fell into silence again. They could hardly imagine that the battle between these two people actually required Su Li to take out so many immortal artifacts to deal with it. Even the clash between ancient true immortals would not be so extravagant. Although they had never seen a fairy weapon, they all knew that it was above a holy weapon. As for the holy weapon, in the entire Xintian domain, only the immortal sects and top forces possess it. It is conceivable how terrifying the holy weapon is. This woman's luck is truly incredible. She actually possesses so many immortal artifacts. After a long time, a powerful person spoke in the void. His tone was a little sighing and a little envious. Of course, the exposure of such a magical weapon naturally attracted the envy of many evil cultivators, with cold gleams on their faces, and they all prepared to snatch it away in the future. This also includes some other forces. But soon, the powerful man from the spiritual world spoke again. Looking at the projected image, he seemed to have seen something horrible. He was so shocked that he even swore. Fuck, I'm not seeing things wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 12. Nima, you're a wholesaler of immortal artifacts. That's right. In the scene at this moment, Su Li took out more than a dozen magic weapons after a battle. No. The others had just experienced a shock, and after seeing this, their pupils suddenly shrank and they were speechless. The battlefield of heaven and earth. Back to the arena. Where the hell did you get so many magical weapons? Wanxin had just created some distance and was about to recover when he saw Su Li coming from a distance, and he took out a bunch of magic weapons. There are soul-killing bows, soul-exploding crossbows, and even soul-devouring gourds. If any of these were placed in the outside world, they would be able to cause a bloody storm. Each of them is a powerful weapon of the soul. Su Li remained silent, and there was not a single ripple in her ice-blue eyes. She stretched out her bare hands, took out the soul-devouring bow, and shot an arrow. Swish! The arrow was as fast as thunder, and even made a sharp sound of breaking through the air, and it went straight to Luan Xin's face. Luan Xin's eyes widened, and then he burst out with his cultivation, quickly moving away from his original position, with a demonic aura surging and rolling along with him. Coincidentally, he passed by the arrow and was just a little bit away from hitting it. After seeing that he had escaped, Luan Xin finally breathed a sigh of relief. He had truly felt the feeling of death just now. If this arrow hits him, he will definitely die, given his current mental and physical condition. Thinking of this, his heart grew colder, and even cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Fortunately, I escaped. Seeing that he missed the target, Su Li did not get discouraged. Instead, he took out a black crossbow and shot at the opponent frantically. Although these arrows are slightly inferior to the previous bow and arrows, fortunately there are so many arrows, so many that the opponent is bathed in a rain of arrows, and it is difficult to dodge. Seeing this, Luan Xin's pupils shrank. He gritted his teeth and burst out with his cultivation, fleeing into the distance. However, he still let out extremely shrill screams along the way. There were so many arrows that even though he dodged most of them, there were still many arrows that pierced his soul. This arrow is specifically designed to restrain the soul. Once it hits a person's soul, it will cause him great pain and make him feel as if his soul is being torn apart. However, in fact, his soul is really being torn apart. After Luan Xin swallowed the pill, he fled from here again. Soon, he felt the pressure relieved a little. He seemed to have thought of something, smiled evilly, and turned his head away. Just as he expected, Su Li had controlled so many magic weapons in a short period of time. She was now panting, sweating profusely, and her pretty face was very pale. Luan Xian's smile became more and more rampant, and he said in a cold voice, "I knew that your current state of great power was far from enough to support you in controlling these immortal artifacts. The holy medicine I just took is enough to allow me to repair my soul within the time of an incense stick." Then, he paused, as if he had thought of something. His eyes were cruel, and he spoke slowly. "Then you can expect to die. If you hadn't severely damaged my soul and wielded a soul-killing weapon, how could a mere ant like you be worthy enough to hunt me down? If I catch you later, I will tear your soul apart piece by piece. It makes you feel like you can't die, but you can't live." After saying this, he fled from his spot again, putting quite a distance between himself and Su Li. At this moment, after hearing Luan Xin's words, the pupils of the people in the audience shrank, and they stared blankly at Su Li's weak appearance, and were greatly shocked. Some of them sighed secretly, their eyes filled with regret. That's right, Su Li is only at the level of a great power, not even a god king, so how can she control these immortal weapons for a long time? The final result, without a doubt, will be Luan Xin's victory, without any suspense at all. However, being able to seriously injure a quasi-saint is enough to impress these arrogant geniuses. Even those seeded players, Luan Xin, Hu Yaoyao and others, did not have the confidence to say that they could defeat the quasi-saints in the realm of great power. Even the best among the god kings were a little choked. Seeing this scene, Xian Jia, who was far away, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, with a cold expression on his face. If Su Li really defeated the other party, where would he put his face? He could always claim to be the #1 genius in the 10 regions. It has been like this in the past, and it will not be surprising in the future. He does not allow anyone to challenge his position, no matter if they are an ancient evildoer or a contemporary genius. He knew in his heart that even if he used all his strength, he still could not defeat that chaotic mind. But even so, he would not allow anyone to win. Not only that, Hu Yaoyao, Fozi, Hai Wuhan, and others also breathed a sigh of relief. If a quasi-saint were defeated by a powerful being, they would all be dead. After hearing those disturbing words, Su Li's face turned frosty and cold. Her beautiful eyes were full of unyielding spirit, and crystal sweat dripped from her chin. If she were a quasi-saint, she could easily kill the person in front of her. How could the other party be so arrogant? She also realized that her spiritual power was only enough to last for a while. If she was exhausted after a while, she would be in real danger. Therefore, she had to see if she could severely injure the opponent in this short time, so that when Nangong Chen fought with the opponent, she could gain a slight advantage, even if it was insignificant. This idea was absurd. Even she herself didn't know why she felt that Nangong Chen could defeat Luan Xian, when he was clearly at the same level as her. But the feeling in her heart told her that Nangong Chen could definitely do it for no reason. If there was any reason, it might be her husband. Thinking of this, Su Li's mouth curled up slightly. Her beauty was breathtaking, and then her ice blue eyes burst in a brilliant light. She took a deep breath, stretched out her white hands, and a powerful force burst out. I saw that more than a dozen immortal weapons, mortal soul beads, soul-destroying hammers, and so on, surrounding her, gathering magic power, ready to make that final blow. Nangong Chen, watching from the audience, frowned slightly. Hadn't he said that disgusting the other party would lead to their surrender? Why was he risking his life now? Although he was puzzled, he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. You're crazy. After seeing the other party concentrate on this attack, Luanxin's expression changed, and his previous calmness disappeared in an instant. He can't recover his soul so quickly. If he receives this blow, his soul will be shattered again. He admitted that he had previously threatened the other party and wanted the other party to surrender, but he never expected that the other party would fight him to the end. Chapter 302. Buys, Top 3, Breaking History. Boom! I saw that the dozen or so immortal weapons burst into brilliant divine light and emitted a terrifying power. The next moment, all the killing moves broke out in the sky. A monstrous divine hammer descends from the sky, seemingly capable of shattering the souls of living beings. There is also the tolling of an ancient death knell, like thunder from the plain, rippling the soul. Although the power it unleashes is far less than 1,000th of its peak power, it is still enough to severely damage the souls of creatures below the level of saints, or even wipe them out directly. At this moment, all these killing moves were directed at one person, and that was Luanxin. Below the ring, the entire audience was silent as they all focused on the scene, not daring to blink for fear of missing anything. There was also a hint of shock in their eyes. They had never thought that in the end, Su Li could still perform such an astonishing killing move. After a long time, the mighty power in the sky gradually dissipated, and everyone's eyes widened, their faces flushed, and their breathing became a little rapid. They wanted to witness the birth of this first person, and wanted to witness the appearance of the first person in history who could kill a quasi-saint at the level of great power. Gurgle. I don't know who it was, but because I was too nervous, I couldn't help swallowing my saliva. The sound was particularly obvious in the silent space. The next moment, when everyone saw the situation on the ring, they were stunned. He's still conscious? Someone cried out in amazement, staring blankly at the scene on the ring. On the ring, Luanxin looked like nothing had happened. He just coughed a few times and looked a little weak. His eyes were very clear, without any turbidity at all. You know, if anyone else had received this blow, they would have been shattered and died on the spot, or would have lost consciousness and become a vegetable forever. And Luanxin, despite having suffered severe damage to his soul before, was still able to catch it without any injury, which made everyone puzzled. In reality, Luanxin was truly unconscious at the moment. In his early years, he had obtained a chance, a broken immortal artifact called the Soul Heaven Jade, which could protect his soul from death. But this also comes at a price. The price is taking away half of his life. At this moment, Luanxin's already gray hair became even paler, and he looked less lively than before, with many wrinkles on his face. This change was very obvious, and many people present had noticed it, but they did not mention it. They just had some doubts in their hearts. Soon, they got the answer. After his confused mind and soul were completely reorganized, he took a deep breath, then raised his head with cold eyes, as if a cold and poisonous snake was about to rush out. He stared at Su Li with anger and murderous intent, and spat out a sentence. "You little beast, you actually dared to force out my Soul Heaven Jade. You deserve to die." The voice was older and harsher than before. Soul Jade. After hearing this, the people in the audience gradually changed from being confused at first to being shocked. Soul Heaven Jade, isn't that it? They showed a look of sudden realization, and finally understood why the other party was not dead. In fact, thanks to the Soul Sky Jade, the other party's soul was even more stable and powerful than before. Of course, the half of life that disappeared was real, not fake. In the distance, Nangong Chen also heard the other party's words and frowned slightly. Soul Heaven Jade. He had heard of it. It was said to be a treasure for protecting the soul. There were 10 pieces in ancient times, but they disappeared without a trace. Even in the inheritance of Xianxian sect, there was no such thing. However, the real Soul Sky Jade is far from being so weak. It only proves that the piece in the other party's hand is a remnant imitated by later generations, and the side effects are also very serious, which can reduce half of the lifespan. I didn't expect that I would get one of them. I'm so lucky. Returning to the ring, Su Li saw that the opponent was still alive and knew that there was no way to deal with him. Now her soul power was almost exhausted, and she could not control these magic weapons to fight. And even if she could control it, she would not be a match for the opponent's complete soul. If she continued to fight, death would be waiting for her. Thinking of this, Su Li could only sigh softly, revealing a hint of regret, and then opened his mouth to surrender. "I surrender." After the words fell, the Star Envoy's eyes flashed with a sharpness, and a sense of pressure rose up, which directly suppressed the chaotic heart that wanted to continue to attack and pressed him hard to the ground. Didn't you hear her surrender? You still dare to attack me. Do you really think I'm blind? The Star Envoy shouted coldly. I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Luan Xin crawled on the ground. His pupils were pale, and he could only beg for mercy. Seeing this, the Star Envoy snorted coldly and waved his hand to remove the surging pressure. Luan Xin immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered away, looking very embarrassed. There was no thought of revenge in his eyes. Su Li watched this scene and realized that the other party had saved her. She bowed slightly and said with her red lips, "Thank you for saving me, Star Envoy." The Star Envoy waved his hand, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly under his mask. He didn't dare to accept this person's thanks, so he could only say casually, "It's okay. This person broke the rules. How can I just ignore it?" After hearing this, Su Li nodded slightly and then slowly left the ring. Soon, the Star Envoy announced Luan Xin's victory. Suddenly, there was a burst of booing from the audience. On the contrary, the loser, Su Li, received applause from many people. Although they didn't win the battle, they did force Luan Xin to die, which was enough to prove the other party's extraordinary talent. Who else here could achieve this? Even Xianling from the God Clan didn't have such an amazing performance. After Su Li came back, Li Qixin and the others came forward to comfort her. However, Su Li was not surprised at her defeat. She just said a few polite words and walked straight towards Nangong Chen. Sure enough, as soon as Su Li arrived, Nangong Chen knocked on her crystal jade forehead. Not too hard, but not too light either. Didn't we agree to surrender early? Why do we have to keep fighting? Nangong Chen said with some blame. Originally, what he said to Su Li at the beginning was just to use the mortal soul pearl to suppress Luan Xin. If successful, he would pursue the victory and consume the opponent's energy. There was no need to fight to the death. Because the other party is a quasi-saint. How can you possibly guess how many tricks he has? But after Su Li heard it, a look of grievance appeared on her beautiful face, and there seemed to be a layer of mist in her eyes, making her look pitiful. She seemed to want to explain, her red lips moving, but after thinking for a long time, she didn't know what to say. She could only quietly lower her head, like a wronged goose, and whispered, "Am I still alive?" Nangong Chen wanted to say something when he saw the other person like this, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. He could only sigh and say, "Okay, don't do this again next time." After Su Li heard this, her beautiful eyes lit up and she nodded vigorously, very obediently, as if to say, "I will know it later." Nangong Chen smiled, as if he had thought of something. With a look of praise on his face, he said, "But the fact that you were able to shatter his soul and force out his soul heaven jade is still very useful to me." After she finished speaking, Su Li proudly raised her crystal neck, revealing her snow-white swan neck. Her eyebrows curved, and even her heartbeat quickened a little. She knew that everything she did was worth it. Nangong Chen did not hesitate to praise her and gave a few sincere compliments, which made Su Li blush. Things like fairies descending to earth, goddesses saving the world. He praised almost everything that could be said. Of course, these are all sincere, because Su Li has indeed made great contributions. If he finally faced Luan Xin, he could kill less people. Although it didn't make much difference, it would allow him to use his hands less, which was indeed a good thing. Thinking of this, Nangong Chen couldn't help but feel much happier and was glad that he had married a good wife. Of course, the look in his eyes as he glanced at Luan Xin was still extremely cold and filled with murderous intent. He hadn't forgotten what the other party said when he left. In the outside world, after seeing Su Li lose in the end, everyone could only shake their heads helplessly and let it go. Although they had expected this, they still couldn't hide their disappointment when they saw such an enchanting Su Li being eliminated. This means that they only have one person with double pupils left. Alas, who would have thought that in the end this Luan Xin actually had a life-saving magic weapon on him? Otherwise, I would say that this goddess Su would have made history. Yeah, I wanted to witness a powerful being kill a quasi-saint. What a shame. This is only the first battle, and our only 2 Su goddesses have been eliminated. I wonder if those with double pupils can advance today. It's difficult. There are wolves in front and tigers behind. But compared to Goddess Su, he should be under much less pressure. After all, he has avoided the existence of Luan Xin. That's hard to say. After all, neither Xianjia nor Hu Yaoyao from before are kind. It's also hard to say whether the one with double pupils will get a bye. Oh, that's right. I remember now. There are buys today. If I really get one, I'll be so upset. I'll be in the top 3 for nothing. Everyone was talking about it, their eyes shining. Tianyuan Dynasty. In the palace, when the ministers saw Su Li's defeat, they sighed and felt very unwilling and regretful. What a pity! Such an enchanting goddess, If she hadn't drawn this chaotic heart, she would have advanced long ago. There's nothing we can do. The people of the Blood God cult have always been such beasts, using their strength to bully the weak and the big to bully the small. And now, they're even more arrogant, running to the immortal treasure to bully these younger generations. When this person was mentioned, the whole court was filled with anger, and everyone cursed the person's ancestors for 18 generations. Nangong Chen comforted them and said, "The fact that the goddess has made it to the top 5 is a great honor, a precedent for the divine dynasty and a breakthrough in history. There's no need to be overly sad. You should be proud of her." Then, he looked at the image in the projection and slowly said, "My son is still among them. Regardless of whether they win or lose today, these two are both the most talented and unrivaled men in our divine dynasty." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the audience echoed them. That's right, the Crown Prince and Crown Princess have reached this point, which has completely exceeded our expectations. They're in the top 5 of the 10 domains. What a talent. Yes, they're still young, yet they have accomplished such a feat in their early 20s. They are truly a match made in heaven. It is hard to imagine how powerful our divine dynasty will be in the future. When they come back, we will tell the people of the world that these are the sons of the divine dynasty that we are most proud of. Seeing this scene, Nangong Chen smiled. Tianyuan has never been the Tianyuan of one person, but the Tianyuan of everyone. After he leaves, with such a national spirit here, there will surely be no worries and the world will be at peace. On the battlefield of heaven and earth, as the first battle ended, it was time for the second battle to begin. From Xianjie to Hu Yaoyao, both of them are favorites to win the championship. After learning the result, everyone was excited, as it meant that they could witness a real battle between monsters. But soon after, someone discovered that the battle between these two people seemed to mean that Nangong Chen had a bye. Upon hearing the news, Li Qixin and others were ecstatic and excited, with joy filling their faces. They didn't expect that the lucky one who advanced to the top 3 would be someone from their Xintian domain. Entering the top 3 of the 10 domains is simply unprecedented. There is no doubt that Nangong Chen has set a new record. Soon, Wang Teng, Chao Li, Lu Dazui, Xionda and others also sent their congratulations to Nangong Chen. Nangong Chen did not refuse and nodded in response one by one. After all, one should not hit a smiling person. Although he didn't want to get a bye, after all, fighting is so interesting, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that God blessed him. Alas, those two died later. Nangong Chen thought to himself and glanced at Xianjie on the stage and Luan Xian not far away. At this moment, Xianjie on the ring saw Nangong Chen looking at him. His face was gloomy, and he gritted his teeth secretly. After he learned about the first battle, he knew that the other side had a bye, but he didn't expect that now that he was about to start the battle, this trivial matter would steal his limelight. "Well, I'll let you live a little longer. After tomorrow, you will die." Xuanjie's eyes were cold, releasing a terrifying murderous aura. Of course, if Nangong Chen knew what he was thinking, he would probably sneer at him. It was still unclear who would die. On the other side, Fox Yaoyao, a girl with dazzling golden hair, didn't react much even though she knew that Nangong Chen had a bye. She decided that the master was so lucky. After all, she also wanted to get into the top 3 without any effort, but unfortunately she didn't have that luck. Looking at Xianjie in front of her, Hu Yaoyao's pretty face was extremely solemn, and her almond-shaped eyes were slightly narrowed. There was no doubt that Xianjie would be the strongest monster she had ever encountered. In this battle, she has to give her all and not slack off in the slightest. Chapter 3:03 Xianjie, you are crazy. At this moment, the eyes of all the geniuses below the stage were focused on the ring. The previous champion Xianjie faced Hu Yaoyao, the favorite to win the Xianzong Championship this time. Unsurprisingly, this battle will be a highly anticipated showdown. Judging from the previous battles, it is hard to say who will win between these two people. The terrifying thing about Xuanjie is that he won all the previous battles by crushing them, making it difficult for people to understand what kind of terrifying methods he has behind them. Often the unknown is the most terrifying. And Hu Yaoyao, as the princess of the demon realm and the only princess in the heavenly demon dynasty, was born with a monstrous talent and a 9-tailed body. The 9 tails in the Fox clan represent the ultimate sublime and the strongest symbol. Those who are born with 9 tails are destined to stand above all monsters. The most terrifying thing about this physique is that every time she awakens a tail, her abilities, magical powers, and physical strength will all be qualitatively improved. This is enough to allow those with this physique to crush the monsters of the same generation in every era. This is also the reason why Fox Yaoyao, who had only awakened 3 tails, was able to suppress the Buddha's son with twin bodies in the previous battle. The bodies of the demon race are innate, while those of the human race are acquired bodies developed through the evolution of their skills. The physical strength of the two is a world of difference. The innate body is stronger than the body cultivated after birth. This is why the ancients loved to compare the geniuses among their own disciples with the descendants of various ancient ferocious beasts. Of course, there are a few among the human race who can cultivate their physical bodies to the extreme. Therefore, it is hard to say who will win or lose this battle between the two. Now, I declare that the second battle of today officially begins. At this time, the Star Envoy saw that the two had taken their positions and announced lightly. As soon as the words fell, both of them attacked, not giving the other a chance to react. In other words, they started with 0 frames. A demonic light shone in Hu Yaoyao's almond-shaped eyes, and her white hands turned into claws. A brilliant purple glow burst out, transforming into a monstrous fox claw that covered everything below. This is the Sky Fox Claw, one of the great magical powers of the Fox clan. When cultivated to the peak, it can tear the sky and earth apart, shatter the stars, and nothing can resist it. With this move, Hu Yaoyao went straight for the opponent's vital point without holding back at all. The relationship between the two can be described as extremely tense, with constant clashes. Just like the relationship between the Demon Realm and the Burial Sky Realm, the competition is extremely fierce. Anyone who could defeat the opponent's genius will be rewarded handsomely by his domain, and may even be crowned with honor. What's more, he is such a top genius. Seeing the purple fox claw falling, Xianjie's face was calm, without a trace of fear in his eyes. He stretched out his hand, divine light flowed, and endless fist light poured out. Boom! The collision of the two was like a collision of comets, causing a violent blast of air that instantly swept across the area. In an instant, everyone could hardly see what was happening on the stage, and could only see a blurry scene. "You are too weak." After a few breaths, a disdainful and cold voice sounded. The gusts of air dissipated, and only a figure stood in the center of the arena. His dark gold robe was spotless, and his eyes were staring quietly ahead. The divinity that soared into the sky was like a real god. This person is none other than Xuanjie. Not far away, Hu Yaoyao fell to the ground. Her bright face was pale, with some blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Her golden hair was extremely messy, and she was looking at Xianjie with gritted teeth. Her slender right hand was covered in blood, with the white bones exposed. This punch actually crippled her right hand. After seeing this scene, everyone was also shocked. It was hard to imagine that Hu Yaoyao was so strong physically, and there was actually someone who could directly confront her. This Xuanjie is truly worthy of being the champion of last year. He's truly amazing. Someone lost his voice, his eyes filled with shock. This is really unsolvable. Xianjie's invincibility is so terrifying that it makes people feel powerless, deeply powerless. On the ring, Xianjie did not give Hu Yaoyao too much chance to breathe. Seeing that he was injured, his figure flashed, and his speed was as amazing as lightning. In a blink of an eye, he came in front of Hu Yaoyao, lifted her up with one hand. His face showed coldness, and his left hand turned into a light blade, emitting a dazzling cold light. 1,000 light blades, a great magical power of the gods, had been seen by everyone before. It chopped the image of the human genius into pieces, which was extremely terrifying. And now, the light on this 1,000 light blade is even more dazzling than before, and the cold light can even whistle out. Obviously, Xuanjie was serious. Hu Yaoyao's pupils suddenly shrank. Before she could even react, she was strangled by the other party. "You deserve to die." Hu Yaoyao gritted her teeth, and her body trembled violently. From childhood to adulthood, she had never suffered such humiliation. Seeing that this round of light blade was about to end her life, Hu Yaoyao still did not surrender. Suddenly, her almond-shaped eyes burst out with astonishing beams of light and rushed towards the other party. This beam of light exuded an extremely dangerous aura, easily tearing through the space, as if wiping out everything in sight. Xuanjie also felt the danger, and instantly let go, dodged several miles, and flew to a place not far away. Boom! The beam of light fell and directly pierced an extremely deep hole at the place where Xuanjie had just been. This is a battlefield made of meteorite iron from outer space, but it was easily penetrated by it, which is enough to show the horror of this move. If Xianjie had not let go just now, his entire arm would have been torn apart. "Not bad. You actually forced me to use 50% of my strength." Xianjie nodded thoughtfully, looking down at the other person with a condescending look. He then continued, "But that's all. After all, this 50% of your strength is your limit. From now on, you won't have any chance of winning at all." As soon as he finished speaking, A terrifying aura burst out from Xianjie's body, and his whole state seemed to have entered a demigod level. He held a sacred spear in his hand, and divine light flowed between his eyes. Xianjie, at this moment, is in a completely different state compared to before. It seems that this is the time when the other party is really serious, and he was just playing around before. When everyone saw this scene, their mouths opened slightly, and they were indescribably shocked. Hu Yaoyao exerted all her strength, but she only managed to extract 50% of Xianjie's strength. How strong is this Xuanjie? Soon, on the ring, after hearing the other party's words, Hu Yaoyao's hair stood up, and the 9 tails behind him burst into a terrifying demonic light. Among them, there are 3 tails, which are the most colorful and crystal clear, and also the most powerful. The entire void is gathering that incomparably surging demonic power. Similarly, Hu Yaoyao also tried her best, and even activated the 3-tail state. The previously injured arm was restored to full health in an instant. Hu Yaoyao at this moment is like a different person compared to before, more than twice as powerful. When the demons and others saw this, they were also excited and waved their fists. The princess has finally used the 3-tailed fox. It will surely tear apart Xianjie's arrogant face. That's right, the princess will definitely win. She was just giving Xuanjie a break before. They didn't believe that Xianjie was so mysterious, that he only used 50% of his strength. For such a top genius, if he didn't give his all, he would probably die if he wasn't careful. Unless one side's strength is completely superior to the other side. However, on the side of the gods, Xianhong also sneered after hearing it. He knew that the Son of God would never lie. If he said it was 50%, then it was 50%. He would not deliberately exaggerate or conceal anything. I can only say that these idiots are still too naive. Soon, on the ring, the two started a new round of fighting. Hu Yaoyao's demonic power surged, and he used various magical powers. Light and shadow intertwined, and divine light soared into the sky, without holding back at all. On the other side, Xianjie broke all the attacks with one force. He just threw out the sacred spear and dissolved some of the attacks. Even the residual power was undiminished, shocking Hu Yaoyao to spit out blood, and her pretty face turned extremely pale. Boom! After a few more moves, Xianjie easily resolved the opponent's offensive, while Hu Yaoyao gradually fell into a disadvantage in the repeated fights. Before long, Hu Yaoyao was covered in blood. Her snow-white skin was stained a glaring red. She was panting and looked extremely miserable. On the contrary, Xianjie had no other injuries except for some torn corners of his clothes. He looked the same as at the beginning, with extraordinary spirit and high spirits. Since he won't surrender, then die. Seeing that he was still standing, Xuanjie seemed to have lost his patience, and murderous intent flashed in his eyes. The next moment, he condensed a shocking shot and transformed into a dazzling white dragon, crossing the silver sky, bursting out with terrifying power. Hu Yaoyao was almost exhausted, and the magic power of her 3 tails was also used up by her. Facing this attack, she was unable to resist. At this moment, she deeply felt the gap between the two of them. Both were at the peak of the Divine King realm, yet there was such a huge gap between them. It seemed that the gap in foundation caused by the time gap was still quite difficult to make up for. If she had been born a few decades earlier, the current situation might have been different. At this moment, Hu Yaoyao's pretty face, which was as bright as the sun, showed a bitter smile, and she was very helpless. Then, she surrendered loudly, ending the battle. Seeing that he finally surrendered, the Star Envoy was also wiped out by the White Dragon, and announced lightly, Xianjie of the Burial Sky Domain won and entered the top 3. After saying this, Xianjie took everything back, shook his head, his eyes cold and full of condescension, and said, "You're already confident enough to force me to use 50% of my strength. Among all the geniuses here, your strength is the only one I admire. Unfortunately, if it weren't for me, you would have undoubtedly made it into the top 3 in this immortal hidden." He looked at Hu Yaoyao and said as if giving alms. After hearing this, Hu Yaoyao's beautiful eyes turned extremely cold as she responded, "You're only a few years older than us, so stop being so arrogant. With your arrogant attitude, you're destined to get nowhere. In the future, there will definitely be stronger and more evil beings who will suppress you." Xianjie laughed. It was the first time he heard that someone would come to suppress him in the future. He ignored Hu Yaoyao's impotent rage and glanced downwards, continuing his words. As for the others, Xianjie paused, then stopped in the direction of Tianyuan, revealing a sneer. "They are nothing but trash." As soon as these words were spoken, the geniuses present were instantly furious, but they did not dare to speak out. After all, the opponent's strength was obvious to all. They were horrified. They had not expected that Xianjie's strength was even more hidden than they had imagined. He only used 50% of his strength to defeat Hu Yaoyao. It's hard to imagine how powerful the opponent would be if he used his full strength. If that quasi-saint hadn't mixed in this time, I'm afraid the champion of this session would still be Xianjia. No surprise at all. In the distance, the Buddhist disciple in the Buddhist realm was unhappy when he heard this, but he had no choice but to accept it. After all, he couldn't even defeat Hu Yaoyao. I thought at first that the twins could at least get into the top 3, if not the championship, but I didn't expect that they would end up in the top 10. Well, the Buddhist disciple sighed. Everyone here is a monster. Fate is playing tricks on people. I'm afraid that Xianjia will undoubtedly be the strongest genius of this session. As for Xintian territory, when Li Qixin and the others saw the other party's gaze and spoke to them, their eyes were cold and their faces were full of dissatisfaction. It is obvious that the other party is blatantly targeting them. You know, they had an irreconcilable hatred before. Before, Xianjia destroyed Li Qixin's Dharma image in public, ruined his origin, and cut off his foundation. He simply trampled on the reputation of their Xintian domain without mercy. If this grudge is not avenged, the future geniuses of Xintian domain will live under the shadow of the other party. Why are you pretending? You were just born a few years earlier than us. If you had lived 10 or more years, or even a few years, Brother Nangong, Goddess Su, Overlord, and Moon Goddess would have beaten you to pieces. Lu Daju retorted, his usually harmless eyes now filled with anger and coldness, without a trace of fear. His cultivation is weak, but he is not afraid. Seeing Lu Daju taking the lead, the others also spoke in a cold voice and agreed. They were not afraid of Xianjia. If he had the guts, he could come down and beat them to death. Noisy, after hearing these voices, Xuanjia also closed his eyes. Although he didn't know the name the other party was talking about, he could guess it. After a few breaths, he seemed to have thought of something, slowly opened his eyes, and secretly sneered. Since you like to shout so much, I don't mind extinguishing the hope in your mouths in tomorrow's battle, just like that day. Then, Xianjia looked at Nangong Chen, not far away, and said calmly, if you are afraid, come see me tomorrow, and I will give you time to surrender. Such targeted language and provocative tone would be unacceptable to anyone who heard it. After hearing this, Li Qixin and the others' expressions changed slightly. They all looked at Nangong Chen with a hint of worry in their eyes. They hope that Nangong Chen will not be affected by Xuanjia's words. Chapter 3:04 Xianjia's Power, Chu Xing angry. Not far away, Nangong Chen was dressed in white, with an imposing demeanor and a calm brow. He was surrounded by fairy light, like a banished immortal from the mortal world. It was as if the other party's words were nothing more than the last helpless roar of an ant. After seeing Nangong Chen so calm and composed, many people secretly sighed that the other party had such a character, which was really not something an ordinary genius could possess. Do you know? The last person is arrogant as you would grass 5 feet high on his grave. Nangong Chen responded indifferently, and when his pupils opened and closed, a terrifying vision emerged, and runes intertwined, just like a young supreme being. This voice was extremely cold and carried an extreme confidence, echoing in everyone's ears. When these words were spoken, the pupils of the geniuses shrank slightly. They did not expect that Nangong Chen would respond like this. You know, this isn't just the first round of trials, and Xianjia has already shown astonishing strength in the second round. Even under such circumstances, how dare the god of death challenge him? After hearing this, Xuanjia felt a little uncomfortable. He frowned slightly and looked directly into the pair of eyes that made him very uncomfortable. For some reason, he could feel a vague sense of oppression from the other person, and he didn't know if it was an illusion. You're very arrogant. I hope your strength tomorrow will be as arrogant as your mouth. After a long silence, Xianjia seemed not to want to get entangled with the other party anymore. He said something in a cold voice and then turned and left. Seeing Xianjia leave on his own initiative, everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe that someone could surpass Xianjia in terms of momentum. You know, the god of killing is just the peak of the powerful. At the same time, in the outside world, after seeing Xianjia easily defeat Hu Yaoyao, everyone was speechless, with shock in their eyes. They didn't expect that the gap between the monsters and the 10 domains, who were all seeded players, was so huge. Even Hu Yaoyao, whose body was as powerful as a true dragon's offspring, was easily crushed by Xuanjia. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the most terrifying thing. You never know where the other party is good at. It is enough to see that Xuanjia is almost perfect in every aspect of the battle. After a brief silence, everyone looked powerless, finding it hard to imagine how to win tomorrow's battle. How would the person with double pupils defeat the opponent? It's really too strong. Someone sighed, their voice trembling. They knew that after entering the top 3, they would adopt a round-robin mode. Whoever could defeat the other 2 first would naturally be the champion, and there would be no buys. This also greatly guarantees the value of the championship, and victory can only be achieved by defeating 2 other opponents. Under this rule, the most advantageous thing for him should be Luanxin. If things go as expected, he is destined to be the champion. If Xuanjie and the one with double pupils were to get distracted, they would most likely choose to surrender in order to conserve their energy to compete for the runner-up. This is also the wisest choice, and anyone with a discerning eye can see that. Under such circumstances, tomorrow's competition for the runner-up will become particularly important. It will not only be related to the Inheritance Temple, but also to whether the final points can break through the limit and leave a name on the list of all worlds. Xuanjie had already made his name on the Myriad Worlds ranking in the previous session. If he wanted to compete for the runner-up, he naturally had to go one step further. As the first genius to enter the Immortal Treasure, it is also crucial for Nangong Chen whether he can leave his name on the list of all worlds. However, now that they saw the strength displayed by Xuanjie, most people felt a little desperate. Soon, the image in the projection changed again. Can the one with double pupils win tomorrow? Tianjiao asked, looking worried. After he finished speaking, the square fell into a dead silence. Even the supporters of the double pupil man did not dare to say that he could defeat Xuanjie. That is powerful enough to make people despair, and it is not something that can be overcome by just talking about it. At this time, the disciples of the Sun God Palace saw this and began to sneer in low voices. It really serves him right. He's so arrogant all the time, and tomorrow I'll get to see him fail. Just thinking about it makes me excited, ha ha ha. Throughout history, those with double pupils have never been defeated. Now it seems like nothing more than a joke. His undefeated legend is about to end. If he wins, I'll eat him right there and then. These people who had ill intentions towards Nangong Chen had been suppressing their emotions for a long time. Now that they saw that the man with double pupils was in a bad situation, they rushed to add insult to injury without any hesitation. This also made some supporters of those with double pupils grit their teeth and stare at them with wide eyes. When the Qing siblings in the crowd heard this, they all frowned and were very dissatisfied. What a bunch of beasts! Young master won such glory for our Xiantian territory in the Immortal Treasure, but he never expected that someone among his own people would take advantage of his misfortune. If the young master knew about this, wouldn't he be very disappointed? Qing Fan gritted his teeth and spoke bluntly, his eyes very cold as he swept over the disciples of the Sun God Palace in the sky. Since disciples from all major forces came to watch the game, the void was divided into several areas, and the characteristics between each force were particularly obvious. For example, in the Palace of the Sun God, everyone was wearing robes with the pattern of the golden sun. After hearing this, Qingyu nodded slightly. Her pure, jade-like face now showed disgust, and she was very angry. These people are so disgusting. Qingyu frowned slightly. This was the first time in all these years that she had cursed someone so angrily. But soon, a young man wearing a pig-head mask stood out from the crowd, pointing at the disciples of the Sun God Palace and cursing loudly. You worthless creatures, you're whispering about your mother. Who are you telling it to? It's just a Xuanjie, but you've scared the hell out of you, right? No matter what, those with double pupils are still among the top 3 in the 10 domains. And now, before the battle even begins, you're already mocking them. It looks like you can't wait to see the genius of your own domain lose. If someone doesn't know you, they'd think you were sent by the gods. This sudden curse made the group of Sun God Palace disciples in the sky a little confused. Not only that, even the others were stunned. Suddenly, the faces of the disciples of the Sun God Palace turned ashen after they realized what was happening. Boy, what do you mean by you? Did your father hit you in the sore spot? Or did you admit that you're the opposite party? Oh, right. I haven't forgotten that your true disciple Yi Guqing, TSK, seems to have the experience of being a traitor in the domain. The pig-headed boy sneered and continued, each word precious. Chapter 3:05 Don't blame me, Chu, for being ruthless. As soon as the words fell, countless eyes turned to the people of the Sun God Palace with unfriendly expressions. Yes, why on the eve of the war, these disciples of the Sun God Palace did not want the one with double pupils to win. Instead, they seemed to support the other side's genius of the gods. Even if the person with double pupils had a conflict with the Sun God Palace before, shouldn't they all put it aside and unite to face the outside world in a matter that concerns the reputation of the Xiantian realm? The pig-head masked boy was right. These people from the Sun Palace really might be traitors. Moreover, Yi Guqing was a living example before. At this moment, not only did the independent cultivators present here have cold expressions on their faces, but even the disciples of several major holy places in the void were looking at them thoughtfully. Even above them, some powerful beings in the sky snorted coldly when they saw this, expressing their dissatisfaction. Suddenly, after feeling these gazes, the people in the Sun God Palace were speechless and felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles. The accompanying elder's face turned pale. He knew very well that if the tripod hat was taken off, it would have a great impact on their sun god palace. For a moment, he gritted his teeth, his eyes wide open with anger, his eyes full of coldness, looked at Chu Xing below, and shouted, "Everyone, don't be misled by this brat. He's wearing a pig-head mask, hiding his true identity. Such a sneaky person is definitely not a righteous person, so he would throw such dirty water on my divine palace. I boldly guess that the person who did this to sow discord must be from the blood god cult. Now I will kill this thief." As soon as he finished speaking, the elder of the sun god palace showed murderous intent. His eyes were cold, his hands were clenched into palm seals, and his magic power surged. In an instant, a huge red sun-like palm covered the sky and fell from the sky, emitting an astonishing aura. After everyone sensed this, they frowned slightly. They had not expected that this elder's cultivation level was actually that of a quasi-saint. The strong men in the void looked at Chu Xing below, shook their heads, and their eyes flashed. Just a few words were not enough to make them take action. Besides, this guy is wearing a mask, and no one knows his true identity. If they take action and the other party is really an evil person, wouldn't that ruin their reputation? Even if the supporters of those with double pupils wanted help, they were powerless and could only pray that the other party had other means to resist. Seeing that the palm was about to fall, in the square, Chu Xing sneered, then removed the mask on his face, revealing his true face, and then shouted towards the sky. "Chu Yun protects the emperor." Suddenly, a ray of light bloomed and turned into a red sharp blade, which instantly destroyed the red palm of the sun. Suddenly, an old figure appeared in the void. It was Chu Yun, Chu Yan's protector outside the Nine Heavens secret realm that day. Upon seeing this scene, the quasi-saint of the Sun Palace's expression changed, and he immediately realized something, revealing a kind smile. So it was all a misunderstanding. Everyone was also a little shocked. They didn't expect that this pig-headed boy was actually Chu Xing, the young master of the Chu family. Suddenly, they thought of what Chu Xing had said before, and their lips twitched. It seemed that such behavior was really his style. However, what they could not have imagined was that since when did the relationship between the young master of the Chu family and the person with double pupils become so good, and they actually protected each other so much? Of course, they don't know that this is just Chu Xing's wishful thinking. Seeing this, Chu Xing secretly broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, his bet was right. He knew that Chu Yun must be nearby. Misunderstanding? How dare you hurt our Chu family's young master in Chu City? Where do you put the face of our Chu family? Chu Yun's eyes flashed like cold lightning. Holding a red jade sword in his hand, he shouted coldly, and then swung the sword, which turned into a red sword light, like a string music extremely fast. In an instant, he chopped off the left hand of the quasi-saint of the sun god palace, and blood gushed out so quickly that even the other party had no time to react. Everyone present was shocked. They didn't expect the other party to be so decisive. The sun god palace quasi-saint had never expected that his hand would be chopped off after just one encounter. He could only endure the severe pain and force a smile. This hand, consider it an apology to the Chu family. He knew that Chu City was the Chu family's heaven. Even if he was dissatisfied, he could not take action here. Even their palace master Fun Dao had to think twice. After seeing this, Chu Xing showed a bright smile. "Old Biden, you still want to kill me?" Then he stepped into the air, looked around, and said loudly, "Everyone, now that a battle concerning the reputation of Xintian territory is about to begin, I don't want to hear words that are detrimental to unity in Chu City." After saying this, Chu Xing paused, his expression gradually becoming somewhat grim. "Of course, if anyone says so, don't blame me, Chu, for being ruthless." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present fell into silence. The disciples of the Sun God Palace turned pale and felt extremely regretful. If they had known this would happen, they should not have mocked the man with double pupils. They did not expect the consequences to be so serious. However, some people still had cold smiles on their faces and didn't pay much attention to what Chu Xing said. They wanted to see what kind of expressions these people would have if the double pupils were really defeated. After all, the higher you stand, the more painful it will be when you fall. Seeing that the storm had passed, everyone regained their composure and prepared for tomorrow's needs. After all, tomorrow was the most crucial day, even if they have little hope. At the same time, in the Chu family, after seeing Nangong Chen enter the top 3, everyone fell silent. Even Chu Shanhe, who was sitting high up in the first place, remained silent for a long time. He had never imagined that the genius his daughter had recommended to him that day would actually make it this far. Although there was some luck involved. But luck is also a part of strength, and the other party's qualifications are worthy of this bit of luck. If it were someone else, they would have been eliminated long ago. Now, he is becoming more and more skeptical. In the future, Will a person with double pupils and such good fortune really be killed by the venerable being from the upper realm? Thinking of this, he took a deep breath, and there was a hint of confusion in his weathered eyes. But soon he seemed to have thought of something. His face changed slightly, he shook his head, and his eyes gradually became firm. Others don't know what kind of person the venerable is. Many years ago, he had the honor of meeting one. The shock it brought to him is still hard for him to forget. Everyone knows that saints are the ones with the highest level of cultivation and the most powerful existence in this world. But in fact, it is not so. Above the saint, there is the Saint King. Above the Saint King, there is an even more terrifying existence. People in the world call him the Venerable. Chapter 306, the eve of the decisive battle. As for why Chu Shanhe was able to understand this, it was when he was in his middle age. At that time, he was full of vigor and vitality. By middle age, he had already stepped into the quasi-saint realm, and he was expected to break through to the saint realm in this life. Even so, during a journey south, his faith in Taoism almost collapsed. In the territory of Xintian realm, it is divided into 3 major Shenzhou: East Shenzhou, Central Shenzhou, and North Shenzhou. These 3 divine lands are mostly where human cultivators live. As for the west, it is the extreme west where wild beasts roam, ancient species run rampant, and demons abound. Even if a strong person sets foot in the extreme west, he will be in danger of death, and there is no possibility of survival. It is also listed as one of the restricted areas by the world. However, it is said that deep in the far west, there grow some rare and precious herbs, elixirs, and other sacred medicines. If you can take them, you will gain great benefits. This is also why, over the years, the monks from these major states have always been keen to travel to the far west. To the south of Xintian territory lies a vast sea called the Sea of Heaven. Sea monsters roam in that sea, and there are restrictions. It is said that anyone who sets foot there will be restrained by gravity. But legend has it that to the south stands a gate to the upper realm, called the Realm of Nine. Coincidentally, the place where the hidden family appeared back then was also deep in the sea. Some people also speculate that in the deepest part of the Sea of Sky, there's another world where hidden families live. There are many powerful people there, and they have been guarding the 9 realms for generations. Any one of them can shake the entire Xintian territory. Chu Shanhe, on his way to the Sea of Heaven in search of a sacred medicine, stumbled upon the edge of the 9 realms and, disturbed by the power of its rules, happened to witness a scene from the 3,000 states of the upper realm. He remembered that scene clearly, but he didn't dare to think about it. He only knew that the Venerable was so powerful that he could surpass the imagination of the world. This was also the reason why, when he heard that the Venerable was about to descend to the mortal world, he told his daughter to stay away from people with double pupils. Chu Shanhe regained his composure and looked at the peerless young man in white in the projection with a complicated look in his eyes. Even if the other party can defeat Xianjie tomorrow, so what? After 3 months, the Venerable will descend to the mortal world, and by then, everything will eventually turn to dust. He wanted to prove to his daughter that his choice was right. Immortally family, Back Mountain. Is the final battle finally coming? Li Sanhai looked at the projection in the sky with a deep gaze and spoke. No one would have thought that the young man that day would make it to the final day and rank among the top 3 in the 10 regions. He now feels more and more that this boy must have great luck. However, when he saw Xianjie in the picture, his face turned a little cold. A few days ago, he smashed the Overlord's Dharma image and was humiliated by the other party. This made the entirely family's top management furious, but they could do nothing. Now, we can only place our last hope on the man with double pupils, hoping that he can avenge the Overlord and smash the other party's arrogant face. But they know it is difficult, almost impossible. Do you think his kid can win? Li Sanhai asked the person next to him. After all, people with double pupils have created too many miracles before, turning some impossibilities into possibilities. After he finished speaking, Bai Wudao acted as if he hadn't heard anything. He continued to sip his tea with his eyes lowered, looking calm and composed, with an air of an immortal. After a long time, he uttered 2 words lightly, miracle. After these words were spoken, Li Sanghai's pupils shrank, and he remained speechless for a long time. Zuaxian Pavilion, in the private room on the top floor. I never thought that he would make it to the end. Zhu Ying opened her red lips slightly and stared blankly at the projection in the void, her beautiful and lively face showing a hint of shock. At first, she just thought that the other party had an amazing talent for formations, but she never thought that even his talent for cultivation was so incredible. Chen Song's figure also appeared quietly at this moment. After seeing the projected scene, he was also a little stunned. He had just left a few days ago to practice formations for other families, and today he was just planning to wait until the immortal treasure was over to pick up Zhu Ying. But now, the immortal treasure has not been finished yet. Is he really in the top 3 of the 10 domains? Chen Song asked in a tone of disbelief. Upon hearing this, Zhu Ying nodded slightly. Immediately afterwards, Chen Song's expression gradually became interesting. That day he also looked at the top 10. They were all at least god kings. Their talents made them the top monsters no matter where they were placed. However, the one with double pupils was only at the peak of the great power realm. If it were any other genius, they would just be treated like monsters and hunted. And he really did it. How was this done? Chen Song couldn't help but lose his voice. Seeing this, Zhu Ying's lips curled up, her eyebrows curved, and her charm in an instant was so beautiful that it was beyond words. Ancestor, you will know tomorrow. He was probably the only one in the world who could make the ancestor of the heavenly array holy land so surprised. Then, she looked at the young man in the projection, her smile still lingering. At the same time, Tianyuan Divine Dynasty. After seeing Nangong Chen enter the top 3, the entire Divine Dynasty was unprecedentedly excited. Top 3 in 10 regions, the prince really did it. Oh my god, I can't believe that one day in our Divine Dynasty, someone can enter the top 3 of the 10 realms. In the end, we still have to rely on the prince. At this moment, in the streets and alleys, countless young men and women have fiery eyes and faces full of pride and pride. You know, in the entire Xintian domain, only their Tianyuan Divine Dynasty can have someone enter the top 3 of the 10 domains, and they also made history. The value of this is simply too high. I can already imagine the envious and jealous looks I'll get from others if I go out in the future and tell them that I come from the power of people with double pupils. At this moment, those disciples of the Tianyuan sword sect who originally belonged to the Qian sword sect were so excited that they were speechless when they saw the scene in the projection. You know, they remember vividly that day in the Qian sword sect when Nangong Chen forcefully suppressed Prince Aolong. Whenever they think of that scene, their blood boils. I knew the crown prince would be able to do it. He would definitely be able to defeat that bastard Xianjie tomorrow, just like he beat up Prince Aolong that day. Yes, that day, the arrogant and conceited Prince Aolong was directly suppressed in front of the crown prince. If it weren't for the foresight of our Scarlet Cloud sword sect's swordmaster, who was accepted by the crown prince as his first faction early on, our crown prince wouldn't have come here that day. The swordmaster is truly farsighted. He has now become the head of the Tianyuan sword sect, and his cultivation level even broke through to the quasi-sage level some time ago. These old disciples with weathered faces also sighed with emotion. When the newly joined male and female disciples heard this, they were also shocked. They had never expected that their Tianyuan sword sect had such a history. Soon, the old disciples received admiring glances from the young disciples, who came forward and surrounded them, asking questions and chattering. After hearing this, the old disciples looked at each other, then smiled and answered them. Chapter 307. First battle, Xianjie battles chaos. And in the palace, after knowing that tomorrow would be the final battle, these elderly men were not so agitated, but instead their eyes revealed worry. As strong men of the older generation, they naturally knew how terrifying Xianjie's strength was. Today's battle simply refreshed their imagination. It is a fact that Xuanjie is strong, like an insurmountable mountain. Even though they have great hopes for their own Nangong Chen, they have to admit this. As for Wan Xin, there was no hope at all. As a quasi-saint, he had already secured the championship in this battle among these geniuses. Even if all the monsters from the 10 regions attacked together, it is difficult to say that you could defeat the enemy. Not to mention Nangong Chen, who is only at the great power realm. No matter who he faces tomorrow, it will be a tough battle. At this moment, the atmosphere in the entire court was somewhat depressing, and everyone's emotions were extremely complicated. People are greedy. They had not expected that Nangong Chen would be able to step into the top 3 with his great power level, and his momentum was unabated, and he seemed to be competing for the runner-up. And in such a situation, the strength displayed by Xianjie today was like a basin of cold water, which completely woke them up and made them face the reality. Similarly, Nangong Chen, who was sitting in a high position, said nothing at this time. He stared blankly at the projection in the void and sighed. However, Suming quickly stepped forward to smooth things over. He said with a smile, "The fact that the Crown Prince has now reached the top 3 has exceeded everyone's expectations and even broken the record of the entire Xintian domain. No matter what the outcome is tomorrow, the Crown Prince and my daughter are undoubtedly the most brilliant performers in this immortal treasure hunt. They should be respected by all 3 continents and honored by the Divine Dynasty." As soon as these words were spoken, there was a sudden commotion, and the eyes of these ministers also flashed with light. Yes, why do they have to strive to be in the top 3? It is obvious that the 3rd place is already brilliant, and no one can match it. In the final analysis, they're still trapped in a misconception. Prime Minister Su is right. It's just that we are too ambitious and too incompetent. Someone said with a look of shame. If they were in the past, they would not even be qualified to enter the immortal treasure. So how could they ask the prince to take another step forward? Actually, that wasn't the case. Ultimately, their expectations of Nangong Chen were too high. After all, he had already shown himself to be invincible since he became famous, and was invincible among his peers. This also gave them an illusion that no matter who they faced, Nangong Chen seemed to be able to win. Now, they figured it out. It was just a defeat, so who could resist? Besides, who could possibly win against a monster like that? As for Nangong Chen, who was in a high position, the reason for his anxiety was that he was worried that Nangong Chen would not be able to accept the result of his defeat. Ever since his son's double pupils awakened, he's been so lucky, as if blessed by fate. He's fought wherever he goes and has never been defeated. The current stage is the critical period for the other party to shape his Dao heart and soar to the sky. If he fails, it is hard to imagine whether he will be able to accept it. After all, Nangong Chen had seen many geniuses like this before. After being defeated by geniuses who were more powerful than themselves, they never recovered from the blow. Of course, if Nangong Chen had seen Nangong Chen defeating the ancient monster Chu Wanli in the ancient palace, he might not have said that. You know, Chu Wanli is countless times stronger than Xianjie. When he just entered the immortal treasure, he ranked second on the myriad worlds list. Nangong Chen could defeat someone like Chu Wanli, so naturally, defeating Xianjie will not be a problem for him. Soon, Nangong Chen looked at the projection in the void with sorrow, muttering to himself, "Forget it, defeat is defeat. You are still young, and defeat may not be a bad thing." Then he seemed to have thought of something, and a smile appeared on his resolute and domineering face. "At worst, if you lose, your father will comfort you." The next day, the battlefield of heaven and earth. As the star envoy came to the center of the arena, the geniuses opened their eyes and showed a hint of excitement. After today's battle is over and the inheritance temple is concluded, they can return to their respective domains and leave this place completely. God knows how they have been spending the past month. At this moment, almost all the geniuses present in Xintian Domain, Demon Domain, Sea Domain, Buddha Domain, and Zhongtian Domain were looking towards the arena. The star envoy spoke calmly. "Now, I will explain the rules for today. The top 3 will take turns fighting to compete for the championship. The champion needs to win 2 battles. The runner-up only needs to win 1. And as for the 3rd place, it means not winning a single battle." After he finished speaking, everyone nodded, with no surprise on their faces. For the first 3, this was indeed the fairest way. In other words, if Nangong Chen wants to win the championship, he needs to defeat Xianjie and Luan Xian in turn before he can win the championship. The same goes for Xuanjie and Luan Xin. They need to defeat the other 2 opponents. At this moment, Luan Xin's face was full of confidence. The goat horns on his forehead flashed with evil light, and there was a trembling beam of light in his eyes, which was extremely powerful. There is no doubt that with his quasi-saint cultivation, he will win the championship this time, and none of those 2 people will be his match. At that time, he will go to the inheritance temple as the first one and obtain the true immortal inheritance. Thinking of this, Luan Xin couldn't help but smile, and was even a little glad that the Liang Gui was killed by Nangong Chen in the first round. After all, he had to thank the other party. Otherwise, it would be hard to say whether he could beat that idiot with strong limbs. Xianjie's eyes were cold, and he clenched his fists when he saw Luan Xian so happy. If a quasi-saint had not sneaked in from the other Xintian realm, he would have won the championship again without any surprise this time, and the situation would not be like this now. However, after a brief moment of resentment, he regained his senses, took a deep breath, and planned the battle. If he encountered this kind of troubled mind, he would not give it a chance, but would surrender directly and prepare for a battle with the human boy. And that human boy, no matter how powerful he talks, will never be his opponent. At that time, he will severely humiliate the other party and make him regret coming into this world. After thinking about finally being able to let out a sigh of relief, Xuanjie's expression couldn't help but relax a lot. Not far away, Nangong Chen had a calm expression. Even when he saw the other person's eyes looking at him, he remained calm. After all, why should we care about the gazes of 2 dead people? The star envoy on the stage spoke softly. Today's first battle is between Xuanjie and Luan Xin. Chapter 308. Luan Xin's terrifying strength and Xuanjie's defeat. As soon as he finished speaking, there was an uproar in the audience. Then everyone showed an expression of gloating. You know, no matter who faced the quasi-saint, the only result would be defeat. Xianjie had mocked them before, and even though he was so talented, they were still a little unhappy. Now that they saw the arrogant Xianjie defeated, they were naturally happy. After hearing this, Xuanjie's face showed no sadness or joy. His eyes were as hot as golden magic lamps, blooming with amazing divinity. He seemed not to care about the gazes of the crowd and stepped onto the ring. For him, although Wan Xin is a contestant in this competition, his fundamental identity is not a genius of the time, so he does not care about losing to him. After all, he never took seriously a waste who had lived for thousands of years to become a quasi-saint. Instead, he was more interested in Nangong Chen, who was at the powerful level. He was a little curious about the other party's basis for being so arrogant. Thinking of this, Xuanjin narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but glance at the audience not far away. On the other side of the ring, as a gust of deadly black wind blew past, a strange figure instantly appeared in front of everyone. He has goat horns on his head, wears a black robe, his blood is withered, and his face is pale. Who else could this person be but a chaotic person? Even though Wan Xin had lost half of his vitality, the pressure emanating from his body was still extremely powerful, which made Xuanjie frown slightly. Quasi-saint does have some strength. Xuanjie glanced at the other party, then regained his composure and waited for the battle to begin. But he didn't know that at this moment, Wan Xin was looking at him greedily, as if he was looking at a piece of top-grade blood food. It was so delicious, extremely delicious. He couldn't imagine how much his energy would be restored if he devoured all of the boy's flesh and blood. Boy, I will reduce my strength to that of a god king and fight you at the same level. Please don't surrender, okay? Wan Xin seemed to know what the other person was thinking. His pair of green eyes glowed and turned, and after a moment of silence, he spoke. When these words were spoken, the whole audience was shocked. No one expected that Wan Xin would lower his cultivation level. Is it because his conscience has been awakened? Li Qixin and the others looked at Wan Xin with some doubt, but then they shook their heads firmly. How is this possible? The other party must have some ulterior motive to say such words. If Xian Jie believed it, it would be dangerous. After all, you never know how much evil is in the belly of an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. Wang Teng and the others were also very tactful and did not say anything. They even hoped that Wan Xin would kill the other party. Xuanjie and Wan Xin are both unforgivable sinners. It's a dog-eat-dog situation, and it's a good thing for them whoever dies. If Xuanjie died, the Overlord's revenge would be achieved, and he would be able to concentrate on cultivation in the future. Even those with double pupils could enter the runner-up. And if Wan Xin is dead, that would be an even better thing. He was one of the 4 leaders of the Blood God cult, and was responsible for countless lives. Now, he can even sneak into the immortal treasure. It is hard to imagine what other plans he has in the outside world. If they allow the other party to go back like this, then their Xintian domain will be completely finished. On the ring, after hearing Wan Xin's words, Xuanjie showed a hint of ridicule on his face, and his eyes, full of divinity, had already seen through everything. You are worthy of my body? You are nothing but a piece of trash that has lived for thousands of years. Xuanjie looked condescending and said with disdain. As soon as these words were spoken, Wan Xin's face suddenly became very gloomy and ugly, as if he had eaten excrement. Boy, what do you mean? Don't refuse a toast, and then drink a forfeit. Wan Xin gritted his teeth and said he also realized that the other party should have seen through his thoughts, but he didn't expect that this guy's mouth would be so poisonous, just as mean as that boy in white. Soon, after the Star Envoy announced the start of the battle began in earnest. Wan Xin took the initiative and blew the magic flute in his hand, and his green eyes flashed with terrifying demonic intent. Suddenly, the world was silent, with only a piercing string music playing. The surging black and jumping runes were like the fire of hell at this moment, which could turn into pitch-black shackles and crush the souls of all living beings in the world. At this moment, it seemed as if the entire space was suppressed, and a powerful demonic energy swept across the entire arena, making the stars extinguished and the sun and moon lose their light. When everyone saw this, their pupils shrank slightly and they felt fear in their hearts. This is too powerful. Is this the true strength of a quasi-saint? The destructive power that erupted was completely on a different level from their god king, a world of difference. At this moment, Li Qixin, Hu Yaoyao, Fozi, and other monsters were also lamenting the terrifying power of Wan Xin. Even Su Li, who was standing next to Nangong Chen, was looking at the arena as if facing a formidable enemy. On the contrary, Nangong Chen had a calm brow, dressed in white, and there was not a ripple in his heart. He had been assassinated by a quasi-saint from the Sun God Palace, and had felt the quasi-saint's power early on, so he was not very surprised. Even after seeing the ghost-faced woman easily kill the quasi-saint of the Sun God Palace outside the Nine Heavens secret realm that day, he felt a little disappointed. Quasi-saint, that's it? However, just when everyone thought that Xuanjie on the stage would choose to surrender due to excessive pressure. However, no one expected that Xianjie's face was just a little pale, and then his eyes burst into a fiery light, and a sacred aura emanated from his body, fighting against the monstrous demonic energy. But soon, as Luanxin slightly curled his fingers and his eyes showed a playful look, the next moment, the magic power surged, as if it could turn into a mountain, pressing heavily on Xuanjie. Xianjie felt this astonishing breath. A look of horror appeared on his face, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood, staining his black robe blood red. He originally thought that with his own talent, he could still deal with Luanxin, but he didn't expect that Luanxin's quasi-saint was not an ordinary quasi-saint, but a powerful man from one of the 4 seats of the Blood God sect. At the same time, he was also somewhat puzzled as to why Su Li had been able to fight with the other party for so long. Of course, he didn't have time to think about it, as an even more terrifying pressure continued to descend. Xianjie frowned. Even though he had used the Li Wang shield, it was crushed to pieces by the opponent in an instant. He could not find any way to fight against Luan Xian. The only way is that he has also reached the quasi-saint realm. Otherwise, he will not be able to withstand the opponent's pressure, let alone fight against it. At this moment, Xuanjie's eyes became increasingly cold, and anger burned in his heart. He knew that the other party must have hidden a trick up his sleeve. Otherwise, if Xian Xiangling had been able to hold on for so long, why couldn't he? Moreover, the human woman almost killed the other party. If he surrendered at this moment, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Wouldn't he be telling the world that he was not as good as those 2 women? Luanxin, who was standing in the void, saw this scene at this moment and knew Xuanjie's thoughts very clearly. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He also knew that this monster was a core figure in the Burial Heaven domain, and the trump card he had was indispensable. Unless the opponent has lost his mind and deliberately wants to be killed by him with one blow, there is little chance of killing him. Obviously, the other party doesn't seem like a fool. The only possibility is that the other party wants to maintain that superior dignity. Thinking of this, Luanxin showed a hint of mockery. This was his favorite scene again. He had tortured many so-called geniuses, crushed their dignity bit by bit, and trampled on them mercilessly, leaving them desperate, angry, but helpless. It can be said that over the past 1,000 years, many righteous geniuses have suffered at the hands of the other side. Xuanjie, who was struggling to hold on below, suddenly felt a gust of cold wind blowing, and his face changed instantly. The next moment, a punch came out of nowhere and hit him in the abdomen. He hurriedly tried to block the attack, but it was too late. In an instant, he flew dozens of meters like a kite with a broken string and crashed straight into the edge of the ring. Even the barrier that was erected was shaken suddenly. One can imagine how powerful this punch from the quasi-saint is. Puff! Xianjie spat out a mouthful of blood, his face extremely weak. When he turned around, he saw the figure with the evil smile coming towards him again. His heart was surging, his fists clenched, and he spoke directly. I surrender. Chapter 309. Since you're going to die, you can only obey. As soon as these words came out, the Star Envoy's eyes flashed, and he calmly announced, Xintian territory, Luanxin wins. Upon hearing this, Luanxin withdrew his surging pressure, revealed a smile, and his narrow eyes were full of confidence. This is the champion of the previous session, nothing more than that. As expected, it feels so good to bully these geniuses who have not yet grown up. After defeating Xianjie, it can be said that he has already stepped 1 foot into the ranks of champions, and the next Nangong Chen is even less to be feared. Thinking of this, he was very proud and left the ring with big strides. As for Xuanjie, he was supporting himself with one hand. A trace of golden blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. His face was extremely pale, and he looked very embarrassed. He looked deeply at Luanxin's back, and his eyes had never been so filled with coldness and anger. The murderous intent that surged into the sky was almost turning into a bloody blade, wanting to tear the person in front of him into pieces. After I enter the 9th heaven, I will definitely come to your Xintian realm and kill you. He had never felt so aggrieved before. It could be said that the confusion he felt today had been deeply engraved in his mind, turning into an indelible mark. After seeing that even Xianjie, who was as powerful as a demon, had to be forced to surrender, the geniuses present were deeply moved and once again marveled at the opponent's strength. Sure enough, the gap between a quasi-saint and a divine king is like a chasm. A divine king simply cannot cross it. Yes, not to mention, that quasi-saint still has his Dharmakara that he hasn't used yet. It's hard to imagine. If he uses it, I'm afraid, even if we all attack him together, we wouldn't be able to defeat him in a single blow. This is a complete dimensionality reduction attack. There's no need to fight the next 2 games. Just award it to this quasi-saint. How can we fight this? After seeing Xianjie defeated, Hu Yaoyao's lips curled up slightly and her almond-shaped eyes blinked. It was worth the trip to see such an arrogant Xianjie in such an embarrassing situation. At the same time, she felt somewhat fortunate that she had not encountered Wan Xin in the previous battle, otherwise the consequences would not be much better than that of Xuanjie. Haha, this is the first time I feel like I did a good thing. But it's a pity that I didn't kill that show-off. After seeing Xuanjie's miserable end, Lu Dazhu also laughed out loud, which was very conspicuous in this battlefield of heaven and earth. You said you wouldn't be suppressed. Don't you think this is a slap in the face? Wang Teng and others also looked relieved. Just as the other party had said before, this battle was just a dog-eat-dog fight. No matter who won or lost, they would be happy. Not surprisingly, Xianjie, who had been so arrogant and domineering before, surrendered voluntarily, which made them laugh even more. I thought that the so-called champion of the upper realm, the son of the gods, would have his own backbone and would not choose to surrender. I didn't expect that he was just like other ordinary people, all greedy for life and afraid of death. Xi Meng even raised her sarcasm to the maximum, shook her head, and said with disdain, "As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the louder you fall." Not to mention, someone like Xuanjie, who considers himself noble and extraordinary, must be feeling extremely uncomfortable at this moment. When these sarcastic remarks were made, the geniuses present couldn't hold back their laughter, but because Xuanjie was there, they didn't dare to laugh out loud. It has to be said that the Xiantian domain is extremely aggressive and directly hits the opponent's pain points. When Xuanjie heard this, the back of him in the golden crow robe trembled even more, and his face turned away became extremely gloomy, as if ink was about to drip out of it. "How dare you, Xiantian territory, kick someone when he's down?" Xian Hong on the side was watching cautiously, with a strange and refreshing feeling in his heart, and an extremely complicated expression. What is strange is that no one expected that the arrogant Xianjie would be as scared and embarrassed as an ordinary genius after fighting against the quasi-saint. This completely shattered the impression he had of the other person. Just as the atmosphere was strange, a voice came faintly from the ring. The next battle will take place at noon, between Nangong Chen from Xintian territory and Xianjie from Zhangtian territory. As soon as these words were spoken, Xianjie's eyes suddenly brightened. It was still a few hours before noon. These few hours were enough for him to recover from his injuries and reach his peak condition. When he was in peak condition, he could defeat this kid who was not even a god king with just one hand. Thinking of this, Xianjie took a deep breath, his brows gradually relaxed, and with a look of contempt in his eyes, he turned around and said, "At my age, although I cannot defeat a quasi-saint, I can still defeat the profound Sky Territory's prodigies. Just keep on yelling. The more you yell now, the more severely that brat will be beaten." After he finished speaking, Xianjie snorted coldly and glanced at Wang Teng and others with disdain. When Lu Dazhui, Chao Li, and others heard this, their expressions changed slightly, their eyes flickered, and they seemed to have some regrets. Yes, their casual ridicule will have an impact on Brother Nangong in the future. But soon, a cold voice sounded, which made them completely relieved. "How dare you use me to threaten them? Who do you think you are?" Nangong Chen's eyes were dim, and his black hair was flying. He didn't give him any face at all. The sneer on Xuanjie's lips froze. He didn't expect that at this time, the other party would still be so arrogant that he could never imagine it. Okay, since you're anxious to die, I'll grant your wish. Fortunately, you still have some strength and managed to hold on until the end. Otherwise, I might not have been able to chop off your head." Xuanjie's face was extremely cold, emitting an astonishing murderous intent. He had long wanted to kill this tiny human bug, and this idea had never changed since he entered the sea crossing. Not to mention, the other party killed so many of his clansmen, and the relationship between the two had already reached a dire straits. When Nangong Chen heard this, he was speechless and shook his head. "Why are all of you villains saying the same thing before you die? I really don't even want to say anything back. Well, since you're going to die, I can only obey you." After the words were spoken, everyone present was a little confused, not knowing what the other party meant. However, they all heard that the other party was cursing, which was very powerful. Xianjie was also a little stunned, frowning. Although he didn't know some of the words the other party said, he also knew the sarcasm in the other party's words. "You're sharp-tongued. I'd like to see if you'll be so arrogant in the ring later," he said coldly, knowing that he could not match Nangong Chen's words, and turned away. Chapter 310 Battle with Xuanjie 1. Time flies, and it is already noon in the blink of an eye. Xianjie slowly opened his eyes, and a heart-pounding divine light burst out from them. His eyes were like cold lightning, giving people an incomparable sense of oppression. It was obvious that Xuanjie had fully recovered from the previous battle. Even after fighting with Wan Xin, he had a new epiphany and reached an unprecedented peak. He is determined to win this battle. In the center of the arena, as the figure of the star envoy quietly appeared, everyone present also concentrated and held their breath, their expressions couldn't help but become excited. The most exciting battle of the day is coming. The champion of the previous Xianzong competition faces the strongest dark horse of this competition. Seeing this, the Star Envoy also announced, "Noon has arrived. I declare that the second battle of the day has officially begun." From Nangong Chen of Xintian Realm to Xuanjie of Zongtian Realm. After he finished speaking, Xianjie couldn't wait any longer. He stepped on the void, divine light intertwined, and he arrived on the stage in an instant. His brows were shining, his aura was high, his eyes were arrogant, and his divinity soared into the sky, just like an ancient god resurrected. After seeing this, some people couldn't help but sigh at how terrifying Xuanjie was. He just stood there, without even a thought of fighting with the other party. The aura he exuded was too terrifying, enough to make people afraid of him. As expected of the last champion, if that quasi-saint hadn't been here this time, he might have retained the title this time as well. At Tianjiao's side, the people around him nodded in agreement when they heard this. On one side of the ring, a figure in snow-white clothes slowly walked in the air with an indifferent expression. His heart-throbbing eyes now concealed endless indifference. He didn't make any unnecessary movements. He just stood on the stage in white clothes, but he had an indescribable aura, like an emperor inspecting the world. This kind of temperament transcends the world and has a dignity that is above all things. Even Xuanjie, who was nurtured with divinity since childhood, could not compare with him. It's like the bloodline of the person in front of him was born to be the ruler of that world, the noblest existence. This made Xuanjie feel a lot of pressure and even a sense of blasphemy when facing the genius of his generation for the first time. This feeling made him extremely unhappy, and he wished he could just chop the other person down on the spot. Xuanjie frowned slightly, clenched his hands secretly, took a deep breath, and his eyes were filled with coldness. At this moment, all the geniuses present were looking at Nangong Chen. Looking at the figure that looked like a banished immortal, their eyes were stunned, and they felt indescribable shame. This also made them secretly frightened. Even when they faced Xianjie, they didn't have such thoughts. They didn't know that Nangong Chen was gifted with extraordinary talent, double pupils, and mysterious blood flowing in his body. Coupled with the great Tao and immortal scriptures he practiced, his overall temperament had reached a level that was unprecedented and unparalleled. "My lord, your appearance really makes my heart beat faster." Hu Yaoyao showed a charming look, licked her red lips, and her almond eyes seemed to flash with love. The Buddhist disciple also opened his eyes, looking at the white-clothed figure on the stage with a serious expression. "I originally thought this guy was just lucky, but now it seems that it's not that simple." But even so, for him, a peak-level powerful being, it would still be extremely difficult to defeat Xianjie. Thinking of this, the Buddhist shook his head with some deep meaning in his eyes. As for the gods, Xianhong sneered and looked at the arena with disdain. In his opinion, no matter how extraordinary the opponent's posture was, he would still be ruthlessly defeated by the Son of God. This is the law he has come up with after following Xuanjie for a long time, and he has never made a wrong judgment. Xian Xiangling, who was not far away, also opened her eyes rarely. She had been immersed in cultivation these days and did not care about what was happening outside the arena. However, when her beautiful eyes, full of divinity, saw the two people on the stage, especially when she saw that Xianjie's opponent was Nangong Chen, she showed a hint of disbelief. Why? He can enter the top 3. She thought about it, but couldn't figure it out. In order to find out the reason, she could only put her training aside temporarily and looked at the arena with a little curiosity. Brother Nangong, he will definitely win. On the other side in Xintian Domain, Xionda couldn't help but feel a little dazed after seeing Nangong Chen displaying amazing momentum, as if there were two equally matched opponents on the ring, and then a hint of excitement appeared on his face. Upon hearing this, Li Qixin and the others nodded in agreement, no matter how worried they were before the war. But soon, a breeze blew by, as if waking them up. He looked at the arena with a complicated expression and was speechless for a moment. "Really, can I win?" Chu Yan, who had been silently observing their expressions, had a slight smile on her lips at this moment, and her beautiful eyes showed a smile, as if she had thought of something interesting. Then, Chu Yan looked at the young man in white on the stage, and a strange brilliance bloomed in his dreamy eyes. "He could even defeat my ancestor, so how could he lose?" Of course, the white-haired girl not far behind them also had the same idea. At this moment, Su Li looked at the arena quietly, and the reflection of the young man in white was reflected in his ice-blue eyes. Jiang Inyue took in their expressions, and her flawless face showed a hint of amusement as she looked at Nangong Chen on the ring. "Interesting. I want to see what kind of monster you are that makes them trust you so much," she thought to herself, her eyes becoming more playful. As for Luan Xian, from the beginning to the end, his white-browed face wore a sinister smile, as if no matter who won or lost, it would not have any impact on the final result. At the same time, in the outside world, hundreds of millions of cultivators in the 3 states of Xiantian realm were also looking at this scene with burning eyes. What's more, some people brought their whole family, young and old, with excited expressions, and shouted the names of people with double pupils loudly. The number of Nangong Chen supporters reached an unprecedentedly terrifying number before this decisive battle. The streets of the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty were bustling with people, and some young women were stunned when they saw the true appearance of the godlike young man. Now, I declare that the battle has begun. After a brief silence, the star envoy announced loudly, his tones seeming to carry an excitement he had never had before. The sound was deafening, echoing throughout the battlefield of heaven and earth, and even faintly penetrated, allowing the entire Xiantian realm to hear it clearly. Everyone's eyes were so enthusiastic that they didn't even dare to blink, for fear of missing out on anything that would happen next. In the picture, Xingxin's eyes flashed as he looked at the figure of the young man in white, and he was a little expectant in his heart whether the other party could defeat Xuanjie. Although the opponent is only at the peak of the powerful realm, he has no chance of winning when facing an opponent who is almost 1 realm higher than him. But this boy is the one that person has taken a fancy to. How could he be extraordinary? Chapter 3:11 Battle with Xuanjie 2. I'm really surprised that you actually dare to come up and confront me. You don't know, Xuanjie said calmly. His tones seemed to contain some surprise. His eyes were calm, as if the person in front of him was already a corpse. However, before Xuanjie could finish his words, a dazzling fist mark had already been thrown out. The fist light was overwhelming, and the power it unleashed instantly swept across the entire area, shaking the entire sky. Facing the punch coming straight at him, Xuanjie's pupil shrank, and the words he wanted to say stopped at his lips. He subconsciously used his arms to block in front of him. Boom! Following a crisp sound of broken bones, Xuanjie couldn't stop flying backwards and crashed into the barrier of the arena. There was a loud bang, and countless smoke and dust were raised. Cough! A weak cough sounded from the dust. As the smoke and dust dispersed, everyone saw Xuanjie standing at the edge of the ring, his hands twisted in an extremely strange posture, his flesh and blood blurred, and his eerie white bones exposed. Upon seeing this, all the geniuses present changed their expressions. How could they not see that this punch almost broke Xuanjie's hands? At this time, Xianhong's smile froze, and he looked at the ring in disbelief. Hu Yaoyao stood up suddenly, staring at Nangong Chen in a daze, as if she had seen a ghost. Others may not know how strong Xuanjie's body is, but she knows it very clearly. He is equivalent to the offspring of a true dragon. Even I, when facing Xuanjie's physical body, was suppressed by it. And yet you actually broke Xuanjie's arms with a single punch? Li Qixin, on the other hand, was staring at the scene in a daze. Obviously, he had not yet recovered from this extremely surprising scene. On the ring, Xuanjie gradually recovered from the huge impact just now. He looked at his hands, his eyes full of disbelief. My own hand just broke like that. Xuanjie gritted his teeth, his eyes no longer calm, bloodshot, and he shouted angrily. You beast, you have no moral principles. Who the hell attacked before he even finished speaking? This was the first time he had encountered such a weirdo. At this moment, even though he was so self-cultivating and calm, he couldn't help but swear. In response, Nangong Chen just glanced at him lightly, shook his head, and commented, Not only do you have a lot of murals, but you're also a glutton. Who told you that you can't use your hands when talking? Besides, you're not a human being. As soon as he finished speaking, before the other party could react, Nangong Chen attacked again, throwing a light punch. Fortunately, Xuanjie had anticipated this. His eyes shone with light, and suddenly a green ray of light passed across his arm. In just a moment, the arms that had been bony and white just now were restored to their original state. When everyone saw this scene, they were secretly amazed. They didn't expect that the other party had such a method. This is one of Xuanjie's powers, holy healing. Seeing this, Li Qixin slowly explained to the people around him. In just a moment, he was back to normal. This recovery method is so abnormal. Lu Daju was shocked. Li Qixin smiled bitterly. Xuanjie has at least 9 such abnormal magical powers, and he is different from other Protoss geniuses. He will not have enough divine power to support himself when using these powers. With his divine body, he can use almost any power without any restrictions, and it is even better than what other gods can use. In other words, as long as he can't be killed, he's practically invincible within the same realm. After hearing Li Qixin's explanation, everyone stood there in shock. Within the same realm, there are no restrictions on the use of any magical powers. How can we fight like this? At this moment, they finally understood Xuanjie and why he was the champion of the previous session. It is also clear why the Overlord showed such deep powerlessness when he talked about Xuanjie. Now, they have truly experienced it. Li Qixin seemed to have anticipated this. He glanced at them, sighed, and continued to look at the arena. Seeing that Nangong Chen was still punching him as usual, Xuanjie showed a look of disdain after recovering. He admitted that the opponent's body was indeed very strong, but that was the only reason he was able to hurt him just now. It was just because he was careless. If he tried his best, the other party would not be able to hurt him. Even if he could just destroy the corner of his clothes, he would still consider this human boy capable. Thinking of this, Xuanjie took a deep breath and said slowly, "The power of God, great strength." With the amplification of this power, it is enough to increase his physical strength by several times, and the battle that breaks out is simply earth-shaking. The next moment, Xuanjie's body expanded tenfold, reaching more than 10 meters in height, standing tall and exuding vigorous energy and blood, like an ancient ferocious beast awakening. Seeing this scene, everyone swallowed their saliva secretly. It is conceivable that Xuanjie in this state brought them a terrifying sense of oppression. They even believed it when they heard that one Tianyuan of the giant tribe could be killed with one punch. Immediately afterwards, Xuanjie swung his terrifying fist and suddenly attacked Nangong Chen. His eyes revealed excitement, as if he saw the opponent being turned into a bloody mist by this punch. At this moment, the two people on the ring, one big and one small, formed a sharp contrast. Nangong Chen smiled when he saw the fist that was many times bigger than his own, and the light in his eyes was extremely bright. It was the first time he had seen someone whose strength was comparable to his. Boom! Billions of divine elephant particles exploded in Nangong Chen's body, erupting with tremendous golden energy and blood, covering the entire starry sky. Above the sky, there is a towering divine elephant standing on the galaxy, looking around with disdainful eyes. The aura it exudes is enough to suppress the universe. However, this is not over yet. Behind him, a huge shadow of a god king in white appeared, with his fists clenched, and also burst out. Even in Nangong Chen's body, the Tao immortal scripture was silently running, and dozens of immortal orifices opened. The divine elephant's prison-suppressing power, the heavenly emperor's fist, and the great Tao immortal scripture. With the power of the triple technique, just a sudden blast made the whole world tremble and the space vibrate. At this moment, Xuanjie looked at the divine elephant that could crush him to death with one foot, and the white-robed divine king who was countless times bigger than himself, and fell into a deep silence. But the fist has already been thrown, so there is no reason to retract it. The two fists collided like a big sun hitting a star, bursting out with extremely dazzling white light. Chapter 312 Battle with Xuanjie 3. The geniuses below the stage stared at this scene in amazement, their eyes filled with dazzling white light and disbelief. What a tremendous power this was. Even the barrier of the starry sky arena seemed to waver slightly under this punch. When the white light faded, everyone present couldn't help but stand up, staring at the ring. They all want to witness who wins this battle. Soon, the scene on the ring was clearly displayed before their eyes. With this punch, half of the ring was destroyed, and a huge pit was blasted out, revealing the pitch-black meteorite. When everyone saw this, their faces were shocked, and their breathing became a little rapid. Is this guy human? This is meteorite iron from outer space, as hard as a holy weapon. It has survived countless epics of battles between geniuses and remains unscathed, with not even a single piece falling off. But such a starry sky arena was actually destroyed by a single punch from that god of death. All the geniuses present were silent, as if they had witnessed a miracle. Soon, they saw Nangong Chen hanging high in the void, dressed in a spotless snow-white robe. His handsome face looked like a banished immortal with double pupils, looking down at the world indifferently. After this punch, Nangong Chen was unharmed. Not even a corner of his clothes trembled. In the huge pit on the other side, Xuanjie's figure had long disappeared, leaving only a drop of blazing golden divine blood suspended in the air. And under such circumstances, the Star Messenger has not yet shouted over, which proves that the battle between the two is still going on. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene. Xuanjie, the previous Xinzong champion, was beaten into a drop of blood. Hiss! At this moment, everyone present was deeply shocked. You know, he is very powerful. Why don't you get out now? Nangong Chen's expression was calm, his brows slightly raised, and his double pupils emitted a terrifying light, as if they could see through everything in the world. At this moment, he was looking at the drop of blood. He knew clearly that the other party was not dead, but was hiding in this drop of divine blood. As soon as he finished speaking, Nangong Chen pointed his sword and a 5-meter-long thunder dragon rushed out, with the power of destruction. At this moment, that drop of blood burst out with endless divine light and evolved into a powerful body. Suddenly, the sky and the earth changed color, and all the spiritual energy in the sky gathered towards this body, as if a terrifying existence was imprisoned in this body. Just as the thunder dragon was about to fall, Xianjie's eyes suddenly opened, and astonishing energy burst out, directly shattering the thunder dragon. "Aunt, it was you who destroyed my present life." Xuanjie seemed like a different person, no longer as childish as before, and his divinity was revealed when his eyes opened and closed. At this moment, he was like a high and mighty god, standing in the sky, and spoke in a cold voice, as if Nangong Chen in front of him was just a bug that could be crushed to death with ease. There was a tremendous divine power emanating from behind him, and he seemed like two different people compared to before. This was tantamount to telling the world that he, Xianjie, had become a quasi-saint. Everyone stared at this scene in a daze, never expecting that the battle situation would turn out like this. This life? Could it be that after Xuanjie died, he awakened his previous life self, and thus broke through to the quasi-sage level? Someone present speculated, his eyes filled with horror. They don't understand the gods, but this situation is not uncommon in the heavens and all realms. This is bad. I didn't expect Xianjie to break through to the quasi-saint level right now. Even though he's only in the early stages of quasi-sainthood, he's not something a mere powerful being like the god of death can stop. Yes, with Xuanjie's qualifications, he has entered the quasi-saint stage. Who here can resist him? I'm afraid that even if the previous quasi-saint of the human race came, he would have to drink a pot of wine. In my opinion, the god of killer should surrender sooner rather than later. After all, with his talent, it shouldn't be difficult for him to win the next championship. The geniuses present were talking in low voices, with sighs on their faces. It was obvious that the god of killing would win, but unexpectedly the situation was reversed because of a drop of blood. However, the god of killing has tried his best, and they can indeed see that he is the first person in ancient and modern times to be able to enter the top 3 of the immortal collection at the level of a great power. Moreover, up to now, the god of death seems to have no intention of surrendering. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look at the figure in white, their eyes full of respect. The most stunning dark horse of this Xinzong event is destined to linger in everyone's mind and leave a deep impression. At this moment, the person who was most excited to see Xuanjie become a quasi-saint was Xianhong. His eyes were full of excitement, and his body was shaking. If Xianjie had really died just now, he would probably be held accountable even if he returned to the burial heaven realm. As a result, their burial heaven domain will also lose the title of the first domain. This is a matter of dignity. However, now, everything has been resolved. The Son of God has become a quasi-saint, and nothing can stop him. Has he really become a quasi-saint? Real. On the Xintian domain side, everyone who had originally been filled with joy was now silent. Only Xiongde kept confirming, still unable to believe it. Their faces were somewhat bitter, and they felt a deep sense of powerlessness, as if every time they were on the verge of success, they would be restricted by an inexplicable resistance. It was as if all the geniuses in Xintian domain were cursed. This was the case when Su Li fought against Luanxin before, and it was the same now when Nangong Chen fought against Xuanjie. It seems that I can only take revenge next time. Li Qixin secretly clenched his palms. When he saw Xianjie being beaten into a drop of blood, he thought that his great revenge had been achieved. Now that I think about it, he was just wishful thinking. The corners of Li Qixin's mouth became more and more bitter, and his heart became more and more powerless. There was nothing he could do anymore. Brother Nangong had already reached his limit. However, how could a powerful person like him possibly defeat Xianjie, who had reached the level of a quasi-saint? This was completely a fantasy. Even Chu Yan, who had seen Nangong Chen fight in the underground palace, was a little nervous at this moment. You know, her ancestor suppressed his cultivation in that battle, and only then did Nangong Chen win. But now he is facing a quasi-saint, a monster among monsters. Can he win? Chu Yan's beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she looked towards the arena. Even Luanxin, who was hiding in the corner, was somewhat glad that he did not use too much force. As a quasi-saint, he could see the strength of Xuanjie on the stage. Although he had only just broken through to the quasi-saint level, he was already on par with the late quasi-saint level. If he really faced Xianjie, it would be difficult to defeat him without paying a heavy price. Thinking of this, Luanxin was secretly happy. Looking at the figure of Nangong Chen on the stage, he shook his head. He admitted that he was indeed amazed by the other party, who was able to fight until now at the powerful level, but now it was about to end. Even Jiang Yingyue frowned after seeing Wanqing break through to the quasi-saint level and looked at Nangong Chen with a look of regret in her eyes. Obviously, she also didn't think Nangong Chen could win. At this moment, what matters most is this battle. None more so than Su Li, who was not far away. Her stunning white hair was floating like a waterfall. Her face was extremely beautiful, but with a hint of deep sadness. If someone looked closely, they would definitely notice that her bare hands were tightly clenched, and some red blood seemed to be dripping. If Nangong Chen loses, she will feel worse than anyone else. She had seen the young man's triumphant and confident look, and she also liked the confidence that shone from his brows as he talked and laughed. She loves him, and she really doesn't want to see him feel lost or even... Chapter 3, 13 Battle with Xuanjie 4. Facing the opponent, who seemed like a completely different person, Nangong Chen sneered, and there was only a hint of coldness in his terrifying eyes, without a trace of fear. Even that calm and handsome face finally showed a serious look. When everyone saw this scene, they were shocked and found it hard to believe. Although the other party was speechless, he seemed to be telling the world that only Xianjie, who had reached the level of quasi-saint, was barely qualified to be in his eyes. But how could a powerful man like him defeat Xianjie, who had reached the level of quasi-saint? Everyone is puzzled. They didn't know that the serious look on Nangong Chen's face was not because Xianjie had broken through to the quasi-saint level, but because he was about to complete the final stroke of the Dharma image. At this moment, Nangong Chen closed his eyes, and an astonishing picture of the sky appeared in front of him. With just a few short gold-plated strokes, the picture clearly outlined a human figure. After seeing this scene, the other domain geniuses in the audience were confused and had no idea what the other party was doing. Closing your eyes at this moment. Are you ready to give up? On the other side, Li Qixin and others showed completely different reactions after seeing it. Their faces were full of shock, and they stared blankly at the white figure on the ring. Others don't know what Nangong Chen is doing, but don't they know? He is outlining the Dharma image and is about to become a divine king. This wasn't the most shocking thing for them. The most shocking thing was the image of the other party. It wasn't the legendary ancient warrior, nor was it some terrifying demon. It was actually him. The next moment, in the vast starry sky, a monstrous golden blood energy burst out from the ring, breaking through the divine light that covered the sky and the earth. Roar! It seemed like the roars of dragons and phoenixes were intertwined, like a huge bell, deafening. At this moment, Xianjie, who was standing in midair, had not yet seen the coldness on his face fade away when he saw this shocking scene. His expression changed slightly, and his eyes fell directly on the man in white in the center of the arena. There was even a hint of fear in his eyes. Such a horrifying vision was actually caused by this tiny ant. His intuition told him that if he didn't take action, something might happen next that he couldn't control. Xianjie's eyes were cold, and he raised his hand. A surge of magic power instantly emerged, and a shocking divine spear condensed in the sky. This divine spear is made of colored glaze all over, flashing a sharp cold light. It is forged from the supreme black iron of the gods. When the spear came out, even the breath of the void was somewhat cut off, and the space trembled. The geniuses below the ring were breathing even faster, staring blankly at the spear. The biting chill seemed to be able to easily wipe them out as long as it fell. It was obvious that Xuanjie's first move was a killing move, without holding back at all. Kill! Xianjie uttered a word lightly, his eyes ruthless, as if he was wiping out an insignificant creature. The next moment, the white divine spear fell down with a bang, as if a giant silver dragon was possessed and rushed out. The dragon's eyes were frosty and piercing, and there was a ferocious look on his face, as if he wanted to tear everything apart. After seeing this, everyone was stunned, as if they had already seen the white-clothed body being pierced by the divine spear, and some could not bear to watch. Bang! Accompanied by the sound of shackles breaking, the final stroke of the sky map was finally completed by Nangong Chen. At the same time, the shackles buried in Nangong Chen's body were also quietly untied. At this moment, the countless spiritual energy all gathered towards Nangong Chen's body. The golden light that shot up into the sky tore apart the divine light that covered the sky, revealing the original appearance of the starry sky. Bursts of starlight then fell, illuminating the towering Dharma image below. The Dharma image was high above, 100 feet in length, standing behind Nangong Chen, dressed in a white robe. Every move he made exuded indescribable dignity and terrifying power. It was as if a god had descended from heaven, a god even more divine than Xianjie, especially the Dharma image, which was surrounded by a chaotic aura, making it impossible to see its true appearance. The only thing that could be seen was the eyes that could see through the chaos and make people feel palpitations. What a shocking look it was. All the geniuses in the audience were stunned when they saw it. Even the star envoys present at the scene had their eyelids twitching and their hearts beating fast, as if they had seen a terrifying figure. Even when he faced that person, he never had this feeling. The expression under the star-studded mask was extremely brilliant, and he quickly dismissed the thought of wanting to spy. This kind of existence was not something he could spy on. On the ring, just as the divine spear that had crossed the sky was about to fall, Nangong Chen slowly opened his eyes, and an astonishing beam of light flashed in them. At this moment, he has already broken through to the God King. Boom! An incomparably powerful force burst out from his body and actually shattered the divine spear directly. Seeing this scene, Xuanjia's eyelids twitched as if he had seen something incredible. He looked at the statue that frightened him, frowning slightly. He was puzzled as to why the human in front of him suddenly made a breakthrough. He naturally knew that after the human race reached the level of God King, they would form their own Dharma image, but they were not that powerful. A wisp of breath shattered his divine spear. "Have you thought about how you're going to die?" Nangong Chen said coldly, his words without a trace of emotion, sinking into the other party's ears like the whisper of an evil spirit from the abyss. He clenched his fists, his eyes dim. He had never felt that his strength could reach such a terrifying level. Even now, he doesn't know where his limit is. At this moment, Nangong Chen stood in the void, his double pupils looking down with a cold brow, staring quietly at the person in front of him, his pupils without a trace of emotion, as if he was looking at a dead body. Behind him, the terrifying Dharma image was also looking down at the other party coldly. Under this double pressure, a rare trace of cold sweat appeared on Xuanjia's forehead. Call. He took a deep breath, his eyes gradually becoming serious. At this moment, he actually felt a hint of danger from a genius in the realm of God King. He couldn't help but feel a little irritated. If it were him in his previous life, he could easily crush this kind of insect to death. Why did he fall to this point? Well, let me show you a blasphemous ant. What divine power is. Chapter 314 Battle with Xuanjia 5. Xuanjia's eyes shone with divine light. His divine robe fluttered, and the next moment his palms suddenly closed. Boom! An extremely dazzling white light emerged from the 9 heavens, reflecting 9 supreme figures. Everyone's pupils suddenly shrank. Even Xianhong was shocked and couldn't help but exclaim, 9 gods Lord. This is a terrifying vision that has been summoned by the gods since their lineage. It can only be summoned by those with extraordinary talent. It can change the sky and the earth, and even the stars. In this vision, Xuanjia will gain a unique advantage and increase his strength to an unimaginable level. Looking at the 9 mountain-like statues of gods standing in the sky, just a glance made the geniuses present feel unimaginable pressure. Even the area displayed by the previous battle between the 2 women from Xintian territory was not as vast as this. Visions are above the realm, and can only be performed by those who have reached the pinnacle of cultivation and have amazing talent. Xianjia is not yet a saint, but he can forcibly summon visions. After all, this cannot be achieved without the foundation of his previous life. At this moment, Li Qixin and others looked pale and felt despair in their hearts. It seemed that the white-clothed figure on the ring would be at a disadvantage in front of such an existence. Xianjia stepped on the sky, and every move he made was filled with great power. When his eyes opened and closed, lightning flashed, which was heart-wrenching. If someone observes carefully, they will definitely notice a hint of paleness in his face. For someone with the cultivation level of a quasi-saint, forcibly summoning the vision would be tantamount to destroying his own foundation. But it doesn't matter. The strength of this boy in front of him has completely exceeded his expectations. If he can kill him, what's the harm even if he destroys some of his foundation? Xianjia took a deep breath, his face icy cold as he looked at the figure in white before him, the murderous intent in his eyes unable to be concealed. It is the greatest honor of your life to be able to force out this 9 gods Lord. Before he could finish his words, a blazing gaze flashed across the sky. It was Nangong Chen's response to him. Xianjia's pupils shrank slightly, as if he felt the horror of the gaze. He had no time to dodge and instantly summoned the 9-layered king shield in front of him. Boom! In front of this gaze, the sound of the 9-layered king shield shattering rang out continuously, even with undiminished power, rushing straight towards Xianjia. Swish! Golden blood plasma suddenly spurted out and scattered across the starry sky. Xuanjia's chest was found to have a bloody hole that had been pierced through at some point. Xuanjia's face was stunned, and he seemed to feel a chill rising from his torso. He raised his head suddenly, and when he saw the scene in front of him, his eyes froze. It was a scene he would never forget in his life. Above the 9 heavens, Nangong Chen stood on the dome, his snow-white clothes spotless, his eyes filled with endless indifference, and his sword finger raised high. In an instant, a strange vision rose into the sky, and in the starry sky, endless hazy, chaotic energy spread. And in the center of the chaos, a green lotus slowly rose up, shining brightly, illuminating the sky. The majestic aura that came towards them made the whole place silent. What a blue lotus it was! Just by its appearance, the 9 statues were shattered to pieces, and the 9 gods who had evolved earlier also disappeared at this moment. At this moment, along with the rosy glow that erupted from the sacred blue lotus, a sea of thunder seemed to gather in the sky, with a white jade qilin roaring in it, the sound like a huge bell. The vast white light that seemed to be able to pierce through the pupils also brought everyone's thoughts back. Their minds were blank as they stared at the scene in a daze, but they all knew that the thunder sea qilin under the sacred blue lotus was the opponent's ultimate killer move. So, have you decided how you're going to die? Nangong Chen's lips slightly opened, and his voice was cold, as if it came from the abyss of the earth, making people shudder. As soon as the words fell, the extremely straight sword finger in everyone's sight suddenly fell. The purple sky thunder, hovering in the sea of thunder, was already hungry and impatient. When the sword finger fell, it was like a fierce ghost out of a cage, tearing towards Xianjia like crazy. The white jade qilin also roared and rushed out with endless murderous intent on its horns. At this moment, among the 10 great magic techniques, the most powerful one, the Thunder Emperor's magic technique and the Qilin magic technique, were integrated together. The power that erupted was enough to shake the 9 heavens. Boom! Lightning flashed all over the arena, emitting dazzling light. With this move, Xuanji's body was destroyed on the spot without any surprise, leaving only his tattered soul. The corners of his lips trembled slightly, and he was about to surrender. But he never expected that Nangong Chen had already prepared himself. He activated the secret of movement and came in front of the opponent, and suddenly his fist, as big as a sandbag, fell down. Puff! With this punch, his already half-crippled soul showed signs of being shattered. Xianjie felt his vitality slipping away, and his face became extremely panicked. At this moment, he was really anxious. "I want to vote." Before he could finish, another punch came straight to his face. The terrifying force surged through his soul, and instantly half of his head was shattered. At this time, Xuanji's soul was shattered, with only half of his body left, and he kept begging for mercy. "You can't kill me, I'm a god. Spare my life. I was wrong. I beg you. I dare not touch your Xintian. I want to vote." However, every time he was interrupted by Nangong Chen's fist before he could finish his words. At this moment, Nangong Chen's eyes were indifferent. He turned a deaf ear to his pleas for mercy. His black hair was flying as he just kept throwing punches. The outcome of today was already determined when the other party tried to kill him. Moreover, he almost killed Su Li and even destroyed Li Qixin's Dharma image. Xianjie looked at Nangong Chen with his only remaining eye, which was pale and powerless. He felt a little regretful. Why didn't he kill him early in the first round of trials? Soon, as Nangong Chen's last punch landed, Xuanjie's screams stopped abruptly, and his soul completely disappeared. "You don't know you're wrong. You just know you're going to die. Call." Nangong Chen slowly stood up, took a deep breath, brushed off the dust on his snow-white clothes, and retracted all the strange visions and Dharma images behind him. Everything returned to calm. He knew that Xianjie had a high status in the burial heaven domain, and there would be a lot of trouble after killing him, but he was not afraid. At worst, he could kill one by one, or kill a group of people. After thinking this way, Nangong Chen stood quietly on the ring, looked around, and waited for the star envoy to announce the result. At this moment, no one in the audience dared to look into the boys' calm eyes. The previous cruel scene had already left an indelible impression in their hearts. Even Hu Yao Yao opened her red lips slightly and stared blankly for a long time on her charming face after seeing it. Seeing this scene, even the star envoy was shocked by the calmness of the young man. After a few breaths, he finally reacted and said, "I declare that in today's second battle, Xintian territory, Nangong Chen wins." Chapter 315, Who is the number 1 genius in Xinzong? As Xingqian finished speaking, the people in the audience slowly came back to their senses, and everyone's face was filled with disbelief. Nangong Chen slowly stood up and left. The battle just now spanned a large realm, which was quite exhausting for him. A trace of fatigue flashed across his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. As he passed by the star envoy, he said softly, "Thank you." When he was hammering Xuanji's soul just now, Although every punch was interrupted the other party's speech, Xuanjie still said the word surrender, although the voice was as small as a mosquito's. But for a strong man like the Star Envoy, how could he not have heard it? He was just pretending not to hear it. This is why. In the end, Xuanjie said no more and went to his death with despair on his face. The indifference of the Star Envoy played a big role in this. If the Star Envoy used his means, it would be easy to pause this battle. But fortunately, the other party did not seem to pay attention to Xuanjie's call for help. Although he didn't know why the other party ignored him, for him, after the battle, he did owe the other party a favor. Thinking of this, Nangong Chen sighed softly. He hated owing favors to others the most, especially to this kind of person, and he didn't know when he could repay them. Seeing the young man leave, Xing Qinxi's eyes showed some surprise. He didn't expect that such a decisive and ruthless young man would actually thank him. How strange. No wonder that person values me so much. The Star Envoy shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He was just doing what his superiors had assigned him. If you ask him about fairness, he will just laugh and say that this world is not fair. It's all about who has a stronger background. If Xuanjie was valued by someone today, he would help the other party without hesitation. It's a pity that he doesn't have that fate. Below the arena, the geniuses watched the young man in white slowly walk down, and they couldn't help but swallow their saliva and made way for him. They stared at the figure in white quietly. No one congratulated them, and no one mocked them. There was only deep awe and fear in their eyes. No one expected that this session would produce such a freak who would beat the previous session's champion, a real beating. Moreover, the opponent's cultivation was only at the Divine King level. He had crossed a great realm, and yet displayed such astonishing combat power. This was no longer something that could be caught up with. The gap between their generations had already become an insurmountable chasm at this moment. This was already a terrifying situation, enough to make them give up chasing each other and feel despair. Hu Yaoyao took a deep breath and looked at this adult with her beautiful eyes full of complexity. If she had called him a teasing person before, now, he was a real adult. Who would have thought that the ordinary handsome man she had initially taken a fancy to would be so strong? Thinking of this, she sighed softly. It was really worth it that Bai Long died at the hands of the other party. The Buddhist disciple looked deeply at Nangong Chen's back with a complicated expression. It seems that this child has no fate with my Buddha realm. I am afraid that only Buddha can save this kind of murderous embryo. On the side of the God clan, Xianhong was still in shock after seeing that Xuanjie was really dead. His eyes were dull, as if his faith had collapsed in an instant. To him, Xuanjie is an invincible existence. Even though the other party has character flaws, his strength has been built up step by step among the gods. Even such an undefeated being, despite being a major realm ahead, was defeated by the opponent. It's over. Everything is over. Xianhong collapsed to the ground, his body shaking like a sieve and his voice trembling. If the elders of the clan knew that Xuanjie had died in the immortal treasure, he would not know how much anger he would have to endure when he returned. Even the entire burial heaven realm would be shocked. This was the only hope of the gods over the years, and he died just like that. Soon, a white figure passed by his eyes. Xianhong's lips moved, and he subconsciously wanted to say something, but he quickly took it back. The reason was simple. Nangong Chen glanced at him, and just this one look made him feel like he was falling into an icy cave, walking on thin ice, as if his soul was about to be swallowed up by it. As for the remaining Xian Xiangling, she looked at Nangong Chen with great interest, her beautiful eyes flashing, and it was unknown what she was thinking. The ones who reacted the most here were Li Qixin and his group. When they saw Nangong Chen end Xuanjie's life in such a brutal way, they felt relieved and shocked. What is shocking is that the other party actually has such powerful combat power. He can fight against the quasi-saint just by breaking through to the God King. Even at the end, when Xuanjie used the vision, Nangong Chen was still able to use that extremely terrifying vision to suppress the opponent's vision, which completely refreshed their understanding of monsters. They had never heard of such a strange phenomenon in people with double pupils. It was obvious that the other party must have a big secret, but no one asked much about it, and some even wanted to cover up for the other party. After seeing Nangong Chen coming over, Li Qixin excitedly stepped forward and patted his shoulder vigorously. "Brother Nangong, I knew you could do it." Seeing his great revenge come true, even though he didn't kill the person himself, it didn't stop him from feeling relieved. At least the knot in his heart had completely dissipated. Li Muxiu also sighed. Sure enough, there is a huge gap between heterochromia cultivators. Brother Nangong, you really opened my eyes. I never thought that the limits of heterochromia cultivators like me could reach such a level. Ahaha. When I first saw Brother Nangong, I knew he was no ordinary person. He must be a leader among men, a hidden dragon. Now it seems that my vision was not wrong. Lu Dezhu also laughed and said that as an angel investor, He believed that investing in the other party would be the best thing he would do in his life. Xiong De, Wang Tung, Chao Li and others also looked at Nangong Chen with admiration. Shimeng and Chuyan's beautiful eyes shone brightly, and their glances were slightly evasive. After all, Nangong Chen is so dazzling that no matter how calm they are, they will feel restless when facing such an outstanding person of the opposite sex. Jiang Yingyue, who was not far away, had a strange look in her beautiful eyes when she saw Nangong Chen. She looked him up and down as if he were a monster. As for Su Li, who was at the back, a smile flashed in her beautiful eyes, her silver hair swayed gently, and she looked at Nangong Chen surrounded by everyone, with the corners of her mouth slightly raised, looking incredibly beautiful. Chapter 3:16 Hunting Plan. In the outside world, after seeing Nangong Chen really defeat the rising star Xianjie, the whole audience fell silent. Everyone's eyes were blank, their faces were stunned, and their minds were blank. No one expected this result. You know, Xianjie broke through to the quasi-saint level in the arena. Quasi-saint, he is a real quasi-saint. What's more, this talented and monstrous genius broke through to the quasi-sage level. His combat power is simply despairing. Even in such a situation, the one with double pupils could still kill him without leaving any trace of flesh and blood. Hiss! The talent of that person with double pupils, how monstrous would that be? I dare not even imagine it. After a long time, everyone slowly came back to their senses, their eyes still filled with shock, and they sighed. Xianjie, the previous champion, fell to a person with double pupils. There is no doubt who will be the #1 prodigy in this Xinzong. Yes, who would have thought that the young man who emerged from Eastern Divine Continent that day would have grown to this point today? Even if he might not be able to defeat Wanxin later, this battle where a Divine King killed a quasi-saint today will definitely leave a lasting mark in the history of Xiantian territory. As the sighs faded away, the supporters of the person with double pupils began to cheer loudly, so loud that it was deafening. The whole world was filled with the name of the person with double pupils. In the crowd, Qingyu looked at the projected scene, her beautiful eyes sparkling, as if with a touch of bright tears, and she said in a trembling voice, "Qing Fan, did you see that? The young master did it?" Qing Fan nodded heavily, clenched his fists, and looked at the white-clothed figure in the projection with the same excitement. Who could have imagined that the man who walked out of the Qing family compound that day has now reached the point where all the geniuses in the Xiantian realm need to look up to him? As the news of Nangong Chen's victory over Xianjie spread, that day, no matter which top force, the Li family, the Chu family, Howren Pavilion, etc., all sent people to East Shenzhou, secretly to that mysterious dynasty, to send congratulations. When a true dragon emerges from the abyss, it will be unstoppable. Moreover, the growth rate of this child is already so fast that it is unimaginable. Who could have imagined that on that day, the other party killed Prince Ao Long right under their noses, and today he is already a rival to the quasi-saint? Of course, this also made the people in the Sun God Palace and others extremely nervous, and some of them regretted why they had provoked the other party before. In the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty, the people on the street were crying with joy. They could never imagine that the prince had won. There are even many cities that have proposed to build statues of the prince for people to worship. There is no way. At this moment, as long as you are a citizen of the Divine Dynasty, everyone knows Nangong Chen, everyone knows the person with double pupils, everyone knows the power of the prince, and everyone worships the prince. It is rare to see a person's reputation resound throughout the streets and alleys of an entire dynasty, and even 3-year-old children know his name. To them, Nangong Chen is more like a spiritual pillar, the backbone of the Divine Dynasty. It seems that as long as he is still there, no matter what difficulties or crises they encounter, they can all be solved by him. Inside the palace, there was even more exclamation. The indescribable surprise and joy were reflected on everyone's face. Nangong Chen was even more so, his face full of smiles as he slowly spread out the family tree in his hand and lightly tapped the pen. He decided to open a separate page for his son. What a waste. He calls himself a god. I think the gods in the burial sky realm are all a bunch of brainless people. In a secret room in the palace of the sun god, Fen Dao cursed loudly with an extremely gloomy expression. He really didn't expect that with such a huge advantage, Xianjie could still be defeated by the opponent. The quasi-saint was killed by the god king. What a ridiculous joke. Brother Fun, why are you so anxious? Even though that child with double pupils has some talent, he will die if he doesn't come out. Opposite him, a black-robed figure slowly lowered his eyes to drink tea and said lightly. If a powerful person had seen this figure at the Chu family meeting that day, he would have recognized that the other person was Wen Shaoxin. Of course, the fact that Wanxin and Liang Gui were able to sneak into the immortal treasure so smoothly was inseparable from each other's contribution. That's not wrong. After hearing this, Fan Dao glanced at him, his anger seemingly subsiding as he said thoughtfully, "As the blood god cult's ambassador, you would actually cooperate with this old man. How bizarre. Do you know how many people in this world would want to kill you if I revealed your identity?" Ha 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 ha. Under the black robe, when Xiaosheng laughed as if he had heard a joke, he stood up and patted his shoulder. "I believe Brother Fun is a smart man and would not do such a thing. After all, our goals are the same." Just this one slap made Fan Dao feel tremendous pressure. His mind was in turmoil, and a flash of shock flashed in the depths of his eyes. I didn't expect that the leader of the blood god cult would have such a terrifying cultivation level, reaching the peak of sainthood. Looking at the entire Xintian realm, there are only a handful of such people. Such an existence would actually cooperate with me. However, he also knew that the purpose of this envoy was to kill all the geniuses in this generation of immortal treasures, which happened to coincide with his own purpose. After all, Yi Guqing, the only genius who entered his own palace, is dead. What does the lives of the geniuses from other forces have to do with him? Thinking of this, a ruthless look flashed in Fan Dao's eyes, and he slowly said, "What do you need me to do?" Brother Fun is indeed a smart man. Yes, he knows how to judge the situation. Seeing that he agreed, when Xiaosheng also boasted, then looked out the window and said quietly, "All you need to do tomorrow is break the 7-star formation left by the Chu family after all the Tianjiao come out. I will help you to contain Chu Shanha." Upon hearing this, Fan Dao nodded thoughtfully. Although he looked calm, his mind was already agitated. The 7-star formation is a defensive formation specially set up by the Chu family for the returning geniuses of the immortal hidden realm. It can withstand attacks from several saints. After all, there have been cases in the past where people have tried to assassinate geniuses. However, it is rumored that the 7-star formation was sealed by the Chu family in their ancestral land, making it difficult for ordinary people to access it. If they succeed in obtaining it, they will be the burial place of the next generation of the entire Xintian domain. Thinking of this, Fan Dao's breathing became a little rapid. It was the first time for him to do such a cruel and inhumane thing. However, thinking of the growth rate of the person with double pupils, Fan Dao took a deep breath, his eyes filled with coldness. The other party's talent is really too terrifying. If he waits until the other party grows up, he will definitely die. He can only strike first. However, in order to be fully prepared, Fan Dao still asked in a deep voice, "Li Canghai, the ancestor of the Li family, Chu Shanhe, Zhao Lei, the holy lord of the heavenly sword, and even Shun Song, the ancestor of the heavenly formation Holy Land, have been seen active in Chu City recently. Are you sure you can do it?" When Xiaosheng smiled, very calmly, and shook his head, "Brother Fun, you don't need to worry about these things. You just need to know that the blood god cult is omnipotent. When the matter is accomplished, the things I promised you will naturally fall into your hands." Chapter 317. The Power of Mountain Disaster. The Emperor's Sword appears. The battlefield of heaven and earth. As the battle between Nangong Chen and Xian Jie comes to an end, the final battle is about to come. After resting for a few hours, Nangong Chen slowly opened his eyes, and, as his pupils opened and closed, an astonishing beam of light burst out. At this moment, he finally had an assessment of his strength after breaking through to the God King. If he gives it his all, fighting against a mid-stage quasi-saint will not be a problem. This is a very terrifying concept. He has just entered the stage of God King. That is, the early stage of God King, but he can cross a major realm and kill the quasi-saint. It is already comparable to the ancient monsters and the stunning monsters that appeared in the long history. On the other side, Wanqin was also busy practicing his mental skills to restore his condition to its peak. After experiencing the battle just now, he no longer dared to underestimate the young man who threatened to kill him. Judging from his current condition, he might really kill himself. Seeing the figure in white already standing on the stage, Wanqin was a little dazed. He had never expected that there would be a genius in the world with such terrifying talent. If I had known this, I shouldn't have mocked this kid earlier. If I risked my life on this trip, wouldn't it be a loss of the greater good? Even Wanqin himself didn't realize that he was afraid of the ruthless young man before the battle even started. Just when his mind was in turmoil, a cold voice sounded from the stage. The voice was neither loud nor soft, but everyone present could hear it clearly. "Blood god cult lackeys, come up and die." As soon as these words were spoken, the whole audience was in an uproar. Looking at the domineering figure on the ring who looked like a banished immortal, they were speechless for a moment. This voice also completely woke up Tang Xin. After he reacted, his eyes were cold and murderous intent could not help but burst out, and his previous fear was swept away. A young boy who has just become a god king dares to insult me like this. Does he really think he is afraid of me? He did not forget that the girl's ability to chase and beat him was mostly due to the boy in front of him. If he did not have the Soul Heaven Jade, he would have been tricked by the other party. Thinking of this, Luan Qin's figure flashed like a ghost, and in just a few steps he arrived on the ring. He looked at Nangong Chen, his eyes filled with sinister intent, and said darkly, "Boy, if you can apologize to me, I will be magnanimous and forgive you. Or perhaps you're just flattering me and admitting that you're no match for me. I don't think the Immortal Treasure Championship is that important. You can just surrender and let me win. There's no need to fight to the death." Hearing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. No one expected that Luan Qin would give the god of killing a way out and even give up the Immortal Treasure Champion. They all knew that the winner of this battle would be the champion of this immortal treasure. The champion is self-evident. Not only can you gain a good reputation, but you can also obtain a good inheritance in the next inheritance temple. This can be said to be a huge temptation. If anyone else were here, they would probably not be able to resist it. With just a few words and a show of submission, he was able to avoid a powerful enemy in the late quasi-saint stage and easily win the championship. At this moment, all the geniuses were looking at Nangong Chen with flickering eyes, wondering if he could resist this huge temptation. Li Qixin and the others also changed their expression slightly. Their eyes were extremely complicated. In fact, Luan Qin did have a life-and-death feud with them, which was understandable, but Brother Nangong was a genius and had already fought to the top 2 and was only one step away from winning the Xinzong Championship. If I fail here, wouldn't all my efforts be in vain? After weighing the pros and cons, even a 3-year-old child knows what to choose. But even so, they still had some vague expectations in their hearts, expecting Nangong Chen to give them a different result. After all, it was a pity for them to let the strongest evildoer among them flatter that chaotic person. Of course, they also know that this is very unlikely to happen. Just as everyone was lost in thought, a calm voice sounded again. "Is it open?" Nangong Chen seemed not to have heard it and ignored Luan Qin, but looked at the Star Envoy beside him. The Star Envoy was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect the young man to turn his gaze to him. After hearing the other party's words, he nodded subconsciously. The fight had already begun from the moment they stepped into the ring, but it was just a formality. Hearing this, Nangong Chen nodded slightly, his pupils flashing with blazing runes, and his eyes swept over Luan Xine. The next moment, a golden energy and blood burst out from his body, surging in the void. The image of the God King also condensed in an instant, and he just threw out a simple punch. An extremely powerful fist light burst out in an instant. Luan Qin was stunned, and the confusion in his pupils turned into a dazzling fist light. This guy, he attacked without even being told. Before he could react, he saw the fist light falling. In an instant, he felt a surge of great power erupting in his body, and a fishy and sweet taste surged up his throat. Then he saw his body flying out. It crossed the void, forming a blood-stained arc. Boom! Luan Qin slammed heavily onto the barrier at the edge of the arena, and the entire arena seemed to shake. His face was pale, and he looked at his chest with a dazed look in his eyes. It was already covered with cracks and blood, as if it had suffered a severe injury. He had not expected that a simple punch from the God King could almost shatter his body. He could not imagine how terrifying the physical strength of this boy was. Seeing the mighty divine thunder and the white jade unicorn condensing in the sky, Luan Qin's extremely pale face finally reacted. He clenched his palms, and the terrifying demonic intent enveloped the void. Did you really think that just because you defeated an early-stage quasi-saint, you were invincible? You're so shameless, aren't you? At this moment, in that half of the sky, an extremely terrifying demonic figure condensed. It looked like a goat, like a unicorn, with a body of 1,000 feet, standing tall between heaven and earth. This strange appearance also instantly caused the pupils of some of the geniuses present to shrink slightly. This is the mountain disaster, a foremost existence among the ancient species. It specializes in devouring human souls. Even beings as powerful as the 10 evils dare not provoke it lightly. I never thought that this existence, which disappeared from the universe for nearly tens of thousands of years, could still be seen here today. After these words were spoken, everyone sighed. They had not expected that Luan Xine's origins were so horrific. Although Luan Qin never revealed his true identity, he could guess that the other party must have a blood relationship with this mountain disaster. On the ring, the overwhelming pressure came down with a bang, and the void trembled. If there were other geniuses here, they would probably be wiped into pieces on the spot. Only a monster with an extremely strong body like Nangong Chen could remain calm and act normally in the face of such pressure without any restrictions at all. Nangong Chen just looked up at the monster with a strange face, and he felt a heart-wrenching black mist attacking his soul. With his current spirit alone, he cannot withstand such black fog. He stared at the endless black fog descending, his brows furrowed slightly as he muttered, Do I still have to use the human Emperor's sword? Although he can also use other immortal weapons, their power is far less than that of the divine weapon Human Emperor's sword, which is a divine weapon that can fight across several major realms. In order to avoid any mistakes, the Human Emperor's sword is definitely the best choice. Seeing him like this, Luan Xin sneered. You must be scared, silly. You dare to try to kill the 4 leaders of the Blood God cult. Just as he finished speaking, a dragon roar like a huge bell sounded from the sky. Everyone present was shocked. Luan Xin's expression changed slightly. He looked up at the sky, and his pupils suddenly shrank. At some point, the peerless figure in white had already stood in mid-air, with the terrifying green lotus image appearing behind him, and in his hand, he held an object with fairy-like air. He could see that it was obviously an elixir, and an extremely vigorous one at that. Under the gaze of everyone, Nangong Chen slowly swallowed the elixir, and the surging medicinal power exploded in his body. In an instant, a blazing golden sword of the Emperor appeared in Nangong Chen's hand. His face was cold as he looked towards the 1,000-foot mountain standing on the ground. A hint of murderous intent flashed across his pupils. Today, kill 4. Chapter 3:18. Cutting the chaotic heart. All beings sigh. As soon as the words fell, a dazzling golden sword light fell from the sky. The burst of surging sword intent was enough to tear the void apart, changing the color of the sky and making all the stars pale in comparison. That extremely blazing edge was like a constant announcement to the world that the power unleashed by this sword was enough to surpass that of a quasi-saint and even a saint. Luan Xin was stunned. The pale pupils were filled with dazzling golden light. He seemed to see an almighty heavenly emperor with his back to the abyss, and all living beings in the 9 heavens and 10 realms were bowing to that figure. For a moment, his mind was shaken, and he couldn't believe what kind of existence he was facing. The descendant of the great emperor? Or an ancient mighty being? Or perhaps the future emperor of heaven? He didn't understand, but he knew that these were people he could never afford to offend in his entire life. With this boy's sword, can the Blood God cult's future plan be accomplished? At this moment, he was overwhelmed with thoughts, and countless of his old beliefs collapsed. Swish! With the last bitter smile on his lips, Luan Xin's life, along with his soul, was instantly annihilated under the dazzling sword light. The 4 quasi-saints of the Blood God cult were in a state of confusion and perished completely at this moment, without even a trace of life remaining. It seemed as if the heavens were taking notice, and at this moment a long rain of blood began to fall, dyeing the dark arena red, but not a drop of blood fell on the peerless beauty in the void. At this moment, the entire arena was silent and still. They looked at the figure in white, shocked as if they had seen a god. Even the star envoy was silent for a long time before he slowly spoke. I declare that in today's final battle, Xintian territory, Nangong Chen wins. At the same time, Nangong Chen from Xintian territory won the Immortal Treasure Championship. After these words were spoken, all the geniuses came back to their senses from the endless shock and looked at the young man in the snow-white clothes who slowly walked down from the ring with eyes as if they were looking at a monster. Before this battle began, everyone thought that with the strength of the Luan Xin quasi-saint, this battle would be a foregone conclusion. Even if the killing god was more evil, it would be impossible for him to kill the late quasi-saint with his divine king status. However, in fact, he did it. He really did it. He crossed almost 2 major realms and killed Luan Xin without any delay. Even though the god of kill reversed the situation in this battle by taking out a small golden sword at the last moment, it was still due to the opponent's hard power. After all, in a life-and-death battle, who cares what trump card you use or what background you have? The one who can survive to the end is the real strong one. Over in the burial heaven realm, before the battle began, Xianhong was still somewhat upset about the death of the son of God, thinking that the other party just had a powerful physical body. If he abandons this physical body and relies solely on the clash of magic, he will definitely not be able to defeat the son of God. Now it seems that he is the one who is looking at the world from a narrow perspective. The son of God deserved to die. Xianhong smiled bitterly and muttered to himself, his eyes full of fear. Not to mention the son of God. Even if the elders of the clan were to come, they might not be able to block this sword. This strength has already surpassed all the geniuses of the same generation. Of course, the stronger the opponent is, the better it is for him. After returning, he can also report to his clan. After all, the opponent can kill a late-stage quasi-saint. Isn't it natural for Xuanjie to be killed by him? Not far away, the divine Xian Xiangling, when she felt the aura of the sword, her beautiful eyes, which were colorless, finally revealed a hint of fear. This sword made some memories emerge in her mind, as if she recalled something horrible. You know, even when she faced Luan Xin before, she had never been so solemn. As for the demon realm, This sword strike completely convinced some of the geniuses who had previously been dissatisfied with Nangong Chen. They broke out in cold sweats and never dared to think about those things again. Before, some of their domineering people were very upset that Nangong Chen took their rewards for nothing. And after seeing Nangong Chen really win the championship, Hu Yaoyao's red lips became so big that an egg could fit in them. "No way, Your Excellency can even kill a late-stage quasi-saint." The lone Buddhist disciple on the other side was already dumbfounded. After a long while, he finally uttered, "I'm afraid even Buddha wouldn't accept this boy." If they had known earlier that the other party had such means, why would they still be competing for the immortal treasure? Wouldn't they have just awarded the championship to the other party for free? Grass. The Buddhist disciple couldn't help but curse. Although monks don't tell lies, this Nangong Chen was beyond his expectations. Everything that happened was so dreamy that he had the illusion that everything was fake. Who would have thought that a genius who was only at the peak of the great power realm at the beginning could win the final immortal treasure championship? During that sea crossing, the other party declared that we were all trash. At that time, I scoffed at him, thinking that he was just an ignorant brat. Now it seems that we are indeed trash. Being called trash by such a stunning monster is already a great honor to us. He can even kill a late-stage quasi-saint. I can't even wait for the God King, so I'm not even as good as trash. With this man here, I'm afraid the human race will rise in this world, unstoppable. Alas, can any genius among the myriad races surpass his brilliance? In the battlefield of heaven and earth, some geniuses saw this scene, with bitter expressions on their faces, and sighed. As for Li Qixin and others, they were speechless at this moment. Although they were from the same domain as Nangong Chen, they had never expected that the other party would be so fierce. Even the quasi-saint Wanxin, who was regarded by all the geniuses as a nightmare-like existence in the first round and an invincible existence, still died at the hands of the other party. If they were to use 4 words to evaluate Nangong Chen's performance in this session of the Immortal Collection, they could not think of anything other than sweeping it all away. It's so fierce.